I've done 40 years in this business, so this is my 41st year. So as a young engineer, when you start off from college, you feel like you want to change the world, and the world changes you, right? So you adapt to the world. So yeah, after doing a couple of degrees in engineering, I thought it's all about technical. You realize there's so much stuff that with stakeholders that you got to work and make that happen. So having worked at NASA and Boeing and so on and so forth, I was again talking to some gentlemen in the morning here, and they said, working with some of the company. And I said, back in the day, we gave the first order to a small garage operation called Cisco. I mean, 1991. So at that time, little did we know how the world is going to change in so many ways. So I think one of the things that I want to just talk about today is just this amazing world that we live in, and it's transforming all the time. So I think one of the things that I learned over time as an engineer, and then through all our information resource management, MBA, all that kind of stuff, that experience is the best teacher in the world, right? So having worked at that Boeing and then supporting NASA and DoD and Intel community, working at the FBI, as Christine mentioned, finding some folks here in the room who are from former bureau as well. So we went through some of that iteration, and again, as Tom mentioned, that infrastructure after 9/11, gives us a lot of pause as we look at the anniversary, that as a country, we have to come together and really make sure that we are safe. You just noticed the big event that happened and announced yesterday by the Secret Service, where they found 300 servers and almost 100,000 eSIMs, which are essentially were there to disrupt a massive telecommunications challenge, which luckily law enforcement has stopped and now doing a lot of investigation. Well, that's an example again of DHS and the other agencies working together to kind of look at an operation of that scale still happening in NYC. So the actors are getting more brazen, more sophisticated, more voluminous in their attacks, and they're also obviously more impactful. That luckily in this case we kind of worked made sure that didn't happen. Having survived 9/11 and doing all that other stuff, as Tom mentioned, I did do a stint at Indian Affairs, and the director told me, "Why are you going over there? You're the other kind of Indian, aren't you?" I said, "Sir, you can't say that." He said, "You can't say that," but yes, sir, I gotta help him out. So he said, "Well, but why are you going there?" I said, "Yeah, well, they were off the internet for 6.5 years, and the largest lawsuit against the U.S. government at the time." I said, "I gotta help them out." So I felt like a good calling, and I just encourage all of you that whatever you do in your lives, that sort of inner calling is what drives you and energizes you as a human. And I had a chance to see Native America. Had a chance to go to places that not many people go, and we reconnected them in 9 months. And there was a cyber problem is one of the things that I solved over there, and then became interior CIO because the secretary called me up and he says, "We had a bet that you wouldn't last 3 months." I said, "Oh, sir, why?" He said, "Well, they thought probably you were running a FBI operation or something, and I was not. I was just came to help them." So I think one of the things that I've learned over time is that wherever you go, you try to make a win-win proposition and make things happen. And again, Tom and others, are very supportive of some of the things that we did. And so working in GSA as well, from there, running White House programs, federal cloud, we started that. Federal Data Center Consolidation Initiative, if you remember that, 40% data center reduction, FedRAMP, data.gov, all those things. And then, yes, I did get a invite to go to Hawaii. I first thought it was a Chinese government spearfishing attack. They said, "Would you like to be the CI of Hawaii? Just click the PDF below." And I said, "Sure." So I'm calling the gentleman. He's like, "Why are you asking all these questions?" And I was like, he says, "You're the guy with the accent." So I was like, "Well, he said, wait, what, me?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." So we want you to be the first CI of Hawaii. So on a whim, I went, and I learned a lot about state government. So I've seen tribal government, I've seen state government, a local government, federal government, industry in a Boeing company as a chief engineer. But I'm just saying that all of these things have taught me a lot in life, that with humility you can learn and be always willing to serve. So I learned a lot in state government, and especially with the governor, looking at cyber from state government standpoint, because the state governments have more privacy information in all the 50 states than everything combined. And 30% of most of their budgets are from federal grants. So there's a lot of interaction with .govs. And so I did a lot of stuff with three letters and DoD and other things out there. And I think when government helps other government, it makes a difference. So I learned that, and then after that, Treasury CIO and now CBP. So let me just talk about CBP and the mission here. Our mission here is to protect the American people, safeguard our borders, and enhance the nation's economic prosperity. So with that, it's a massive mission. This is literally two Fortune 20 companies in one, and I've served in one of them, so I know what the scale is here. It's incredible. We're having two operations that through the midnight right now that we're operating in, and so it's a constant, ADR kind of a week job. So I think one of the things that I'll just say, a big thanks to law enforcement and the government folks under a lot of pressure, and also our industry, that we're all in this together because that's what it's going to take to protect this country, and that's what it takes every day. The amount of things that we know, of course, are massive. If you just saw this telecom attack, that's pretty massive, right? We process about 10 billion data transactions a day, about 50 billion data exchanges, and we're withstanding about 2.2 billion cyber attempts on us a month. So with that in mind, there's a lot of stuff going on. We have, almost half a terabyte or more information floating through the network every day, and about 50 petabytes of storage. With that in mind, we just recently saw in the big beautiful bill, we're going to get a lot of funding to kind of make sure that America is even more safer in all the things that we do. Uh, we have about 276 apps. Just 23, about 23 of them are high value assets, which are reported to the White House under presidential executive order. And with that in mind, I'll just say that just one of them processes $5.4 trillion, all imports and exports in the country, right? So that is being modernized right now. So ACE is the automated commercial environment that's being modernized as a single trade window for all of the world and the U.S. government. We're also the second largest collection agency. So when I was a Treasury CIO, obviously IRS collects all the money for the government. But also, we're processing a lot in terms of what we need to do for collection. So we've done 34 tariffs so far. Another one coming this week. 34 tariffs, and we have over $200 billion that we've collected this fiscal year. So so when we say that I've got about 250 agile teams, software teams, and Tom, you're exactly right. I've established a good team. You got to have a good team, and all these folks are, in my view, heroes. But also the industry is also part of the whole thing. We have a badgeless environment. I cannot do it without industry. And so all the vendors are coming in. But when you come into this environment, we just have one rule. It's all about excellence and commitment. Nobody over there. There's some people who've given up multi-million dollar jobs. They just want to stay and work all the time. Because what I'll just tell you, and if you just have a moment of grace on this point, that what our law enforcement and a lot of our, war fighters and everyone else is doing in this country every day is stunning, is absolutely stunning. So a big shout out to everybody and industry who keeps this going. So I think let me just talk about what the threats are and what some of the challenges that we have that we need your help on. So I think the first thing is there's obviously emerging technology. So artificial intelligence is a big deal, but we've been doing artificial intelligence for 13 years. So we processed 740 or 800, 780 million people over 6, 7 years. When you do, when you go on the airports and you're doing the facial recognition, right, at the airport, and you just stand in front of the camera, and then you're leaving the country, whatever. So that whole thing is done through facial recognition that we can process. We on the back end we process through a virtual trusted internet connection and a special national security software that we're checking against all our holdings, make sure that there's no overstay and other things, and we're checking also on the way in. We can check an extended perimeter in about 90 countries. We are checking who you are and who's coming in and out. And so we process that with like 2-second adjudication on the back end, of course, a little bit more at the counter. But all of that facial recognition technology and biometrics is going to be a big theme going forward. So you'll see that not only face as a biometric, biographic information, face, touchless fingerprints right on a mobile device. We use that all the time. And what's new is we're going to use AI as an assist. So AI is going to be a tool that will be available to our agents and officers, and how we can do anything from translation to many, many other things. So we've got about 80 to 200 languages that are available. But the interaction of that through a voice prompt as opposed to just a prompt engineering is going to be key. I think another area that's going to be very key for us is mobility and SATCOM directly to phone. Mobility is a big, big area for us. So we have 1,744 locations. As CIO, my remit is 100,000 devices across these locations. It's a massive portfolio that I manage, about 2.4, 2.5 billion, which is about to grow because of all the this big beautiful bill and other things that I'm going to be working on. And that bill itself is, I think, for CBP alone over 4 years is about 65 billion. So that's going to be a lot. Obviously, we get a small portion of that for IT, but I think biometrics is going to be key. Cloud is another thing. We're going to be one of the first agencies starting 2 years from this October to manage and move our entire 276 apps into the cloud. We're 83% on the application tier into the cloud already. We have a tier 4 data center, and we're going to be moving, and we're about half of that on the database tier. So we've got to move all of that into the cloud and be the first agency completely in the cloud. That will allow us to do missions faster, better, more affordably, more securely. So that is the four outcomes that we desire on everything that we do. Mobility is another one. We think mobile is going to be the key to everything that we do. So that's another thing that we're looking at. The mission of CBP is just relentless. So it's national security. Border security is national security. There's national security itself that we check everything that's coming in because we are the ones who are got the authoritative look and see of that. And we're also doing economic security. So, like I said, the 200 billion that we're collecting on tariffs and the 5.4 trillion that we're looking at ACE automated commercial environment, there's a lot of supply chain risk on that, right? So we have to check. So they can come to us on a .gov because we've been pretty secure. I've been withstanding all those attacks, and we recently got from the IG again the top rating again for 6th year in a row. But to me, the big thing is not that. The key is the adversary is changing. So the biggest threat right now that I see is AI plus a little quantum with cybersecurity. That is an indefensible moment at right now for us everywhere. So we got to work and find some solutions that allow us to look at generative AI is what I'm talking about. Sorry. So predictive AI and analytics, we got all the experience, 10, 13 years of that. Generative AI, different. So we're looking at a very secure instance of that to do text, voice to text, video, obviously text to text and all kinds of things where I can actually launch through a voice, get a prompt, look at certain documents and immediately get them summarized so that the agent is in a secure way looking at a device and making that happen and they're interacting with anybody, right? We're also looking at cargo. So when you travel on a plane, on commercial even, 30%, or I'll say 30% of all cargo that is going on that is other cargo that's on a personal plane that you're or a regular passenger plane that you're flying on, and we got to make sure that's good, right? So we want to make sure there's nothing. I don't want to scare anybody, but you don't want anything in there, right? So we are checking for that. So cargo targeting is also very, very important. So before you even get on a flight from anywhere in the world, we're making deals with other countries so that we can get some information with automated targeting systems and everything else. And everything is coming on mobility. So I think mobility is going to be key. Another thing that I'm working on is something called operational technology and information technology integration. So we'll be one of the first agencies to do that with edge computing. The key is that instead of the downlink, this is all the three letters, as well as DoD and others are working the same thing, and civilian agencies, also NASA, and we are also doing the same thing. Because we have 7,575 miles of border, because we have these 175 Border Patrol stations, because we have 328 ports of entry, out of which there are 78 airports that we're checking, because we have 78 or so air and marine operations, we got all these different assets, planes, boats, drones, vehicles, wall with 6 levels of sensors. All of this stuff has Internet of Things. All these sensors will need to be integrated with us. So we're integrating that with IT. So we have air and marine operation integration. We have a common operational picture that is going fusion, going across horizontally and linking that together so I can see something coming across. The border, of course, is secure. We're not seeing any action over there. Now we got to check the north. We are also looking for tunnels underneath, drones above, so counter UAS, all those kind of things that our agents and officers are working in. And let me tell you, these folks work around the clock. It's amazing. It really energizes you to see what they can do. We've stopped 50,000 pounds of fentanyl in the previous 2 years. This year, obviously, because the secure border is reduced. I think the administration seems like done a great job in terms of allowing us to kind of do what we got to do law enforcement. So I think operational technology, information technology with edge computing is going to be a very, very key thing. I think post-quantum cryptography is another area that we need to work on, and we're going to ask in all our acquisitions going forward, coming in 26 and beyond, we'll start putting a clause in there that each industry has to tell us what is your PQC approach, post-quantum cryptography. What the adversary is doing, harvesting now and decrypting later, we can't have that. So we've done our first use case already that that allows us to check on a web a certain way that we can protect, but we're doing 4 to 5 new use cases. So any vendor or the big companies that are bringing to us, we're very interested in PQC. We're also interested in quantum processing and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I'll just say is that there's a tech refresh, hopefully an acquisition coming out, hopefully in next year, which is next fiscal year, which allows us to then, first of all, look at all our assets. Everything that we do nowadays is based on a CPU, right? It's going to change into GPUs. It's going to change into tensors, right? It's going to change into AI/ML processors. It's going to change into all of that stuff. How does the government buy that as a service? How do they do a tech refresh of that? So that is a big, big deal. I know in the bureau, I'd done one where we integrated and did a tech refresh plan for the whole enterprise. In fact, I have 1 or 2 staff over here who helped me with that at the time. I'll just say that was great. And we outsourced that to industry at the time in FBI, and FBI worked with them, even at that level was secret, no foreign, FBI net, and we still made that equipment happen with that. So something like that, if we can get industry to run the logistics of it, make sure that happens and surge as required make us go forward. So some of the things that I want to just talk about is I think, first of all, on the IT infrastructure side, a lot of SATCOM directly to phone out in the edge in a lot of areas. So some constellations, the ones that there are. There's another one that we have found ourselves, so we're going to do that. The who usual suspects are in some constellations with names begin with an A and all the players there, T and others. There's another one that we got that we're working on, and so we want to have encouraged competition there. So making sure that operational technology will bring that together. I think one of the challenges we have in cybersecurity is that we want to really have supply chain intellectual property theft and fentanyl and drugs and so on and so forth really be identified so that conveyance and other things that we do and targeting can be using very specific, should we say, AI to look at that threat and assist the agent. So the AI, our philosophy is the human is in charge. That means the agent or officer in charge, and AI is the assist. That also goes to the trade analyst. We've got a lot of analytics that we're doing to kind of make that happen, and so there'll be a lot more in that area. The other one is the cyber attempts. We've got to figure out a way to do, look, we have a TRM, a technical reference model. We got thousands of products on there. I need to simplify that, but also bring in known exploitable vulnerabilities and making sure that those KEVs and others are really looked at by vendor immediately. So if there's a 0 day, how do we attack that and come and counter that? Recently there are some challenges in that area. So we've got some special technology, but we want to get more in that area. Another area is just making sure that we can start balancing protecting data. So I have an inventory of all the data by stakeholder, by server, by project, by many, many different attributes, all available. So we've got that because that is very important for the AI journey. The next key is how do we classify that data? How do we tag that data and make it available so that metadata is available very, very easily? That is a challenge. So we need some help in this area. Our Chief Data Officer, Michelle Zabrowski, who's also has spoken here many times, is excellent. And my Chief Technology Officer, Sunil Madagiri, is also making some amazing progress in this area. I'd say that data would be a huge, huge thing for us because of the holdings is very, very complex. And how do we make sure that not only is the data secure and the holdings, but how do we make that available so that it is the authoritative source of the data, it's got provenance, and it's got the metadata attributes and the tagging that we need to be able to process it. Overclassification is another issue. I operate mainly as sensitive but unclassified or unclassified. I have secret and top secret also enclaves, but those are not as used as other agencies with us. We obviously share with other agencies, but I really got to get unclassified or sensitive and unclassified /LES, worst case, get it out so that I can tear line that down and send that information out as quickly as we can. The other thing is on the use cases, I'll say we're focusing on strengthening supply chain resiliency. I just talked to the the World Customs Organization, WCO Secretary General, just a couple of days ago. So I think we're doing a lot in this area. And I'll just say, do I have about 5 minutes, Tom? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. So I think one of the things we're doing with the Secretary General, and I can just mention it here, is that we are looking at four areas, which is first, building some US-backed standards for automated commercial environment electronic data exchange as a single window so that this data format can be serving as a global template for message sharing. So that's important. We're also doing a proof of concept for data elements so that we can look at cryptographic proof, DIDs, and selective disclosure, which can be worked also in there. E-commerce and small packages, we're looking at some sort of a JSON message format and to enhance data exchange. These packets, we are processing billions and billions of packages every day. We have got to figure out what's in them and share with postal service and mail facilities and everything else what I got to look at and what's in those packages. Not just blockchain and ledger, looking at what's in there so I can make sure what's in those packages. And the inspection rate needs to improve quite a bit. Other thing is customs bonds, obviously application of certain technologies for both domestic and global bonds issues and all that. But I think one of the things I just want to mention is we're 27 countries involved in different areas of this World Customs Organization. And the Secretary General, Mr. Ian Saunders, is really doing a good job. And he's a U.S., obviously, U.S.-based and from CBP. But he has to obviously be neutral to everybody. But the key is a format where everyone can share this information. But I think you know who adversaries are, the primary adversaries. They're trying to use that to kind of have special products that may have a phonome feature or their own version of something. And we, the United States, have to be very careful on what that is. So why couldn't we do something where what we did on the ecosystem with biometrics? The reason why the biometrics program works at all the airports and all that, did you know that it's not a government program, even though it's a government program that we started initially? But the beauty of that is on the biometric, we met at a standard. So at that standard, at the airport authority and the airlines have a joint interest to make sure they get security and convenience. If they can move those passengers with security and convenience fast, they can get the convenience. We, the government, get the security because of congressional laws that I can verify somebody against the holding. And I've got billions of holdings. I mean, I have like 60 billion holdings in terms of biographics plus biometrics plus touchless fingerprints. I can do the search against an FBI database and eventually want to do enroll, obviously. So I may give you a call for some contacts. So, but it's good to, still contact people and like, hey, you're from a bureau. Yeah, come on in, so we have a good chat. But there's some changes around in the bureau at the moment as well. But I think working with them, that's what it's taking. So I think one of the other thing is trusted partnerships. So I've got 5 levels of trusted partnerships. And I think this is really important what I'm going to say here. The trusted partnerships is within CBP, there are 20 offices, and my office, with every one of them, tells them monthly what we're doing by office, what we're doing for you. Then I'm also working with all the components in DHS and the DHS CIO, but the new DHS CIO is excellent, Antoine McCord. He's also the Chief AI Officer and also the Biometrics Director, along with the CIO himself. So, telling them, here's what needs to be happening, that collaboration. Third, across all the government agencies, we're working with 4 department CIOs at the moment on a program that you'll see announced very soon on a presidential announcement that came out recently. We've been working on that. So we work behind the scenes to make sure that whatever they want to connect up, that all of us are working across these components and with the federal CIO in terms of what happens there. Fourth area is industry, hundreds and hundreds. We've got 60,000 industry partners in various areas connecting with us on the automated commercial environment, and also, looking at how we can work with you to make that happen. If you want to do business with us, go to the cbp.gov Business Connection Portal. I'm sorry, we're a little backlogged right now because obviously we got a lot of money coming in. A lot of people want to meet us, and we don't have enough staff in some areas. You've heard the story before. So we're trying to improve in this area. So I'm going to use a little bit of AI and other things to maybe give everyone a fair shot to kind of come see us. Lastly, international countries. So 98 countries that we deal with, 48 that we're working with. And in many of that countries, we're making a deal with them so that they can give us the data and we give them a little bit of access. And what that does is before you even come to the United States, I know about you, everything about you, and about the cargo way advanced before you get on a plane even coming there, right? Which is extending the perimeter for United States. I think the other one is threat detection and surveillance. We have leveraging AI for computer vision to enhance video surveillance and imagery, which can support of officials in real-time monitoring and pattern recognition. So along the border, you'll see a lot more wall investment. And in the wall, there are many, many levels of sensors. I won't give them all away, but we have a lot of capability in that. And in that, we also have drones. And what's happening is the cartels and others are also doing drones, but they're staying on their side because obviously you know what the announcements have been that if they come to the United States, on the other side, there's going to be, they're going to pay a price. So that has stopped, but they're still doing tunnels underneath, and they're doing drones above, and they're trying to get through there. So we're doing a lot of counter operations there. So a lot of spectrum management, a lot of ways to look at how we can do counter drone operations, and also do surveillance. That, for example, I see gentlemen here from Coast Guard, I think, and from other areas. We work a lot with Navy, Coast Guard, and other entities to kind of make sure that we're all working together with operations that extend out to the Gulf of America and so on and so forth. So a lot of operation there. You see threat detection and surveillance with cameras and the linkage of all of that together, so I can look at all that asset and do targeting packages into going into that. That'd be important. The cargo inspection is another, optimizing cargo inspection using image recognition and anomaly detection to make sure there's trade compliance. This is a massive area for us. So I think with that in mind, there's just a tremendous amount of extra work that's going to be going on in this area. So not only are we modernizing the ACE system, which by the way has 558 sub-apps in that one system alone, and that's one of the 276 that we migrated fully into the cloud. Resiliency is another one. You know, 70% of the world's data is in this area, right? Right. So anyone remember the 45-mile rule? When the plume hits, remember the plume? Okay, don't worry about plume. We got a dome now. We'll protect it. My point is this. We need resilience so that we can survive with data centers and other things outside this area. Not everything can be in one basket. It has to be outside. So making that survive, I think, is going to be a big thing. I think data analytics and reporting is also going to be a big deal with large data sets and making sure from trade to immigration to decision making that can be done. And decision support. We need decision support for border security, immigration, and trade. So let me close out by saying, and then I can obviously add any more that you may be interested in. So I've got 6 focus areas that I focus on, and on each area I've got an organizational lead who handles this. So 6 focus areas. So let me just give you the first thing. Everything's got to be faster, better, more affordable, more secure. So if you remember anything, those are the 4. All right. Second, I want to make sure that I do strategic transformation, tactical ops excellence, and innovation at the speed of mission. What that means is tactical ops means I get to a couple more sigma in my operations, so I don't spend time fighting fires. I can insert new technology like quantum and post-quantum and look at AI ML to the next generation AI, how to bring that in. All these new technologies, SATCOM, directly to phone, all that kind of stuff coming in so that we can be more intelligent in the way and do that strategic transformation. Also data, all that kind of stuff is really that strategic transformation. And innovation is also bringing in innovation. So we've already got 300 RPAs and all that, but robotic process automation now is being overtaken by AI, right? So how do we make that happen into the new world? So that's another challenge that we have. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on data and making sure that that security of that throughout the lifecycle process is going to be very, very important. So applications is number one. Applications with maybe even AI-generated software, but very carefully monitored how we do that, right? API gateways, microservices, how do we make sure that those are common services for those 250 teams that can deploy software faster? We're able to, in some instances, deploy software the next day capability, not even the 2-week agile sprints, even faster than that. How can we make that happen? So that is the remit of Jay Alalasundram, the Deputy CIO for software. He's got 4 SESs under him, and he's got a lot of people doing that. I would say that one of the area for you would be supply chain risk management on the software itself. Big problem right now, especially if it's generative AI in that software as a service. And I don't know, and I think the adversary is absolutely counting on this fact that we don't have enough Americans qualified who can check our software, and they're going to put it in right in there, and then and you have a sort of a agentic AI sending something back to them, and we won't be able to catch it. That's an existential threat. I won't say anymore. And other than that, it gets higher enclaves. But we are tracking it, and we're going to watch that. We are also on the dark web. So I think a lot of stuff on the dark web is going to be looked at, and we are looking at it with 3-letter agencies to look at what are people selling and what it's trying to get at. So JLL Sundram software and application services, 276 apps. Second area is infrastructure, 100,000 assets on one side, 200,000 on the operational technology side. How do I integrate all that together into a massive thing where I can seamlessly do edge computing? How can I do satellite directly to phone? How do I get 5, 6G technologies and other technologies coming in? How do I get mobility to the next level in cloud, so on and so forth? That's Dr. Mays. He's a second deputy CIO and working in that area. We also have received funding on cloud, so we're all ready to go on all of these things. So a lot of good funding and progress there. Third area is operational technology and information technology. How do we link all that stuff together? And the fourth area is cybersecurity, massive area there. Lot of focus on data and a lot of focus on real threats that I can actually act against. Fifth area is governance, which is all the FITARA stuff, but also portfolio management. And I think there's a lot of interest in the administration seems to be for centers of excellence, so that everyone doesn't do the same thing over and over again. How do we go horizontally so that that service is made available, and then maybe get that as a service from industry? So there's going to be a lot in there, so stay tuned on that. And lastly, what I call CIO business operations. How do we ourselves run that? Because at the end of the day, we have to do administration. So I think I'll just leave you with this thought that it's a very exciting environment, a lot of exciting things to come in CBP. There are a lot of great people from government and industry all working together. There's going to be a lot of work that got to be done. But as Americans, I know we're really hardworking people and always looking for excellence. So I thank you for all your contributions so far to the CBP mission. I encourage you to apply for a lot of the things that we're going to be putting acquisitions out for. And if you want an 8 to 5 job, then don't look at CBP, by the way. But if you want to come in and serve and see how recently, for example, we had a case where an agent just sent us a note. They said, hey, we call it chat CBP, which is a very secure way of how we've done a generative AI app. They used that and it assisted, it saved them minutes. And those minutes were able to find drugs and bad things right immediately using that. So that's an example of that makes us happy. Then when we see that, you can see the real mission work. So if you're interested in all of that, come see us and go to cbp.gov. And I really thank you for your time. Thank you for running, 8 minutes over. But Tom, I really appreciate you, brother. Yeah. You've always been looking at the sort of the bright side and making sure that we can all work together to a new horizon. And that excellence is what we need, because at the end of the day, we are America and we got to be #1 here on this. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Sonny. And you've given me about 5 ideas we're going to hit you up on. Try to help you out with that industry partnership part, right?
All right.
Thank you very much. Great keynote. Really appreciate it, my friend. Next up, we have Justin Doubleday from a Federal News Network. And Justin, if you want to bring your panel up, there he is. Now, you're not Jason Miller. I don't think you do the trivia thing. Your colleague Jason Miller always does trivia, but can't wait for this panel. You're not, yeah. Well, I can't do it either, so that makes the 2 of us. Is Gary here? I know this one works. Hang on.
Now, there we go. You're on? All right. Well, yeah, we have a fireside chat here today. Obviously, Garfield Jones couldn't make it, but we have Commander Jonathan White from the Coast Guard. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin.
Yeah, thank you to ATARC and Tom for having me moderate. Sonny just laid out a really compelling landscape of CBP's technology challenges and opportunities. And I think it's probably similar and then some differences for the Coast Guard. Can you talk a little bit about your priorities, especially with kind of your wide remit, cloud, data, and AI?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a couple of things that Sonny said. First of all, the big, beautiful bill investment included Coast Guard, right? $25 billion investment in the Coast Guard. Very critical technologies. A lot of that's steel, right? A lot of that is shipbuilding, aircraft, shoreside infrastructure, but a very focused investment on technology as well in order to enable those platforms, right? There's not you don't just put a ship out there, right? You put actually a floating data center with connectivity backhaul to your cloud environments with the application tier and the data tier that those people are using on board that ship. Actually, by the way, I'm going to be beating feet out of here afterwards, so I can't talk to everybody that I want to. I have to actually go to a discussion about how we're going to enable those ships. So these things are happening right now. These transformative IT journeys that we want to go on. We've made a lot of very strategic investments over the last couple months, getting ready for fiscal year 26, getting ready for Force Design 28. That's just the tip of the iceberg, right? Really excited about bringing in key technologies that enable our operators, get us from idea to implementation in months, right, instead of years. And hopefully, as Sonny said, day. I think we'll get to day eventually. But if we can get a requirement or at least a feature update in the hands of an operator being tested within a month, that would be an exponential increase in capability for us. And you don't get there just by writing code, right? So our investments are in platform technologies, right? So that's enabling the ability to deploy that code in a secure environment, minimizing the work for that software development team. They shouldn't be worrying too much about the infrastructure side of things, right? So abstracting that away, that's my job, right? My job is to abstract the infrastructure away. So we've really leveraged on platform services. It's not in my title, but it's buried in there, right? Everything that I'm delivering is a platform engineered service for the Coast Guard, whether that's the base cloud technology, whether that is a software factory or a CI/CD pipeline, low-code platform environment, the data fabric, and soon to be our AI services platform. That's all going to be consumable services that minimizes the downstream work for our development teams. We also recently awarded our Agile Compass contract, which is one of our irons in the fire for developing code and delivering that code to the operators. So very excited about what's coming soon.
Sounds like a lot going on. The AI services platform, that piqued my interest immediately. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how that comes together?
Absolutely. So we've been working with Homeland Security Works program. That is part of the Defense Works continuum. There's about 11 works programs out there. And so HS Works is one of those. It's run in partnership with DHS S&T. So we did a collaboration event with them in June to really figure out what the problem domain is there. So we came out with about 10 to 11 problem statements that were aligned with Coast Guard equities. Really looking at the infrastructure side first, because you can't deliver AI without a solid infrastructure. You need the ability to run those models, build those models, run them, right? So that's training and inference. You need to be able to deliver that model to application tier, so that's an API integration layer. And they need to secure those models, right? So people are going to be using them in operations. They're going to be touching the data layer all over the place, especially with agentic AI. You have to have control over that flow. So that's the AI servicing layer that I'm speaking about. Everything beyond that is delivering AI as a capability to either an application team or an actual end user. So that work is currently ongoing. We're still working with HS Works, hopefully getting that out the door pretty soon. And that will be an opportunity for us to try out a lot of different technologies, because we don't know what the right answer is, right? We have no idea what the right answer is. So I'm looking to you guys to help us get into that right operating domain with AI and be able to grow those solutions if they pan out as something successful. The other thing that I'm very interested in doing is this idea of can I build a local AI servicing platform, especially with LLMs? So I'm on a cutter, right? I'm out to sea. Most of what I do is probably not that intense, right? It is a chat with very specific data that the cutter might be collecting, or it's doing a mission operation profile, building like operation documents or something like that. I should be able to do that locally on the ship, right? With a locally hosted model. But if I want to do a more intense case, I should be able to offload that to the cloud. So similar to what has been done with GPT-5 recently, right? It says smart mode, right? What that really means is it's offloading your easy chats to a smaller model that's cheaper, and your more complex chats to a more complicated model or a reasoning model, right? I want to achieve that same level of offloading on our ships, whether that's in a disconnected environment and they need to use LLMs for their mission, or because I don't want to send every single query back to the cloud and then incur those costs. So I want to think about those operating models too, is how can I bake that in right from the jump when I'm building new platforms and services for my ships and my aircraft? Can I put that technology right there from the get-go?
What would be the barriers to that today? Would it be the connectivity for the ships? Would it be the data processing that's available on those ships? How are you approaching that?
I think it's connectivity. We solved that problem. We have the Star Shield deployed on most of our assets right now. Not on our aircraft though. We need to fix that. The main problem I think is cost. Right. So when you start using this stuff at scale, you're going to be incurring a huge cloud bill. Generative AI is not cheap. So could I basically prepay my bill by deploying a hardware-based solution for most of those use cases, and then I'll pay for the more advanced use cases for on a cloud case. So that's the way I look at it from a cost angle, but I also look at it like at latency and availability as well, right? So if you're doing a mission profile with these technologies, and all of a sudden it's not available anymore because you've lost connectivity. If in this future state where you're really relying on AI to do your mission, well, guess what happens? Your mission gets degraded, right? So can I smooth those operations out by putting most of my feature suite on the asset itself, and then offload to the backhaul if I have connectivity? So the operator really shouldn't see that degradation, right? It should be a smooth process for them, which is incredibly hard to achieve. And that's why I'm looking for industry to help us get to that state of smooth degradation. Also, hey, by the way, your connectivity is gone, but I'm still able to process your request. It might be a little slower than it usually is, right? So those are the types of things that I'm really looking at. How can we build that infrastructure in right now so we can build that kind of experience moving forward?
I'm not a selfish moderator. I will open this up to questions in about 10 minutes. So if y'all have any, get them ready, and keep them to about 30 seconds and keep them to a question, please. But in terms of, Sunny talked about using, looking at AI as an assist for CBP agents and officers. I assume it's similar at the Coast Guard. Can you talk a little bit about, how you're looking at using AI throughout the Coast Guard? What are some of those use cases that are emerging?
Yeah, we're very nascent in the AI space, right? I love the 13-year journey, but we really haven't been there in the Coast Guard, to be honest. I'm looking to change that very quickly. And so taking lessons learned from other agencies, so there's got to be a litany of lessons that CBP could provide, for example, and how do we avoid those pitfalls? But what we're doing right now is we're doing the data phase of AI. So we're collecting all the data from our source systems, our authoritative systems. We're putting it in the cloud, and we have over 30 systems worth of data in there right now and growing. It's incredible the amount of growth we've had in our data fabric. So it's just a testament to my team enabling that. And it's also, speaking of the panel, it's a testament to the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. The concern is not how can I store all this information or how can I process this information, right? The question is, how can I go faster, right? I don't have those concerns anymore. So really my speed limiter is people, right? It's actually people to do the work. And so we're in that phase right now where we need to build our data teams out so we can pull that data we just entered into the cloud into a engineering effort, do the feature analysis, do the cleaning, do the normalization so that it's ready for AI. And I think that's our current transition point right now. What I would really like to see personally, like with AI, is being able to look at. I actually want to go on the opposite end of the spectrum. So look at what the law enforcement officers are doing today, that's really eating into their time. And there's a couple of examples we already have. So we have a boarding form, right? So the law enforcement officer to get pulled over by the Coast Guard, they have to fill out a form. It's an actual form, right? It's a wet ink form, and then they take that back to the sector, and they'll type that into Missile, which is our law enforcement system. Well, what if maybe I keep the wet ink form? What if I just took a picture of it, and then that information scraped off of that and put into Missile and said, is this right? Right? All of a sudden, you just eliminated 30 minutes worth of work. Even better if I could give them one of these, right? This mobile device and then they're dictating the form, the findings to the device, and the device is filling in the fields for them, right? And maybe it's prompting when it needs more information or missing some stuff. So it becomes a much more interactive experience when you're doing a law enforcement case. Um, the other thing is evidence collection, right? So if you're collecting a lot of digital evidence these days, how do I process all that? How do I find the anomalies in that digital evidence? We worked with Microsoft early on to figure out how we could use not generative AI at the time, but it was more like an anomaly, or I would say it's like feature detection, right? Clustering. And could I? But most of a computer is the same, right? A computer is a computer is a computer. Most of it's Windows. But what if there's a file buried in that that's different than most computers, right? How do you discover that information? Well, AI is really good at doing that, right? And so being able to find those anomalies and find the differences between things really helps in a law enforcement case, especially when you're processing hundreds of devices or information points. So I think that's where the real value is in AI. We got to go to the end user first, build their use case profile, and then come back to the data set and meet those two in the middle with an AI use case.
Oh, that's a fantastic detail there. And yeah, we kind of have gone backwards. We're talking about forward-looking AI and things like that. Obviously, this panel is around IT modernization and moving from legacy to cloud and hybrid environments. You mentioned that you've gotten your data house in order essentially, but what does that environment look like at the Coast Guard right now? Where are you at in that big modernization journey?
Yeah, certainly we're highly invested in low code platforms. We really want to get basically you remove the middleware piece from software development, right? A traditional web tier, you'd be arguing for months about what web engine do you use and what the style should look like and what all these other features are. That's wasted time, right? Just go right into the platform, and now you're talking about the actual modules that you want to have, whether it's a case management solution or it's a mission operationalized platform experience. You kind of put all that aside, right? And you go right into the building of the thing, right? So the concern of the day is not what technology am I using, it's how can I use this technology to meet the mission need. So low-code platforms is a big investment strategy for us. Using integrated SaaS solutions, and I say integrated because they're a part of our cloud ecosystem, right? So we're sharing data from on the cloud backplane between that SaaS environment and our data fabric. It's a direct transfer. Even the data fabric is integrated SaaS, right? We're using SaaS capabilities that are integrated into our cloud experience. In order to do that, we're following DoD policy, by the way. So you have to be your impact level 4 or 5 certification in order to do that. But what that allows us to do is build this cohesive ecosystem in the background. That what that translates to in the operator side is they're not bouncing from system to system to system and copying the same data over for each system, right? They enter it in one place and they're able to access that information from anywhere else. We can build reports and analytics off of that same information they just entered, right? It's real-time analysis type stuff. So that's the type of environment that we're curating right now, being very, very successful with it. And then the next phase, which we just started, and Sunny mentioned it, is sharing data between agencies. So if CBP has collected a bunch of data, we've collected a bunch of data that's relevant across that agency boundary, it should be a seamless share, right? We should be able to pull that information in and expose it to our operators just as much as they can. And so that's part of the thing I'm going to do after this is talk how can we better build our systems so that they're in alignment with our partners, which helps align that data sharing pipeline.
How can you do that? That's an interesting question. I mean, I think there's at the policy level, there's been a lot of discussion around just is this legal? How do we legally share data across agencies? But at the technical level, what are some of the challenges there?
Yeah, certainly when you talk about data sharing, the word schema comes up all the time, right? So you got to know what that data is. So what we've leveraged on is data products And a data product has three core components: the data itself, the schema, and the lineage. Where did that data come from? And there's some quality aspects to that too. And so if we're all playing that game where we're delivering a product which is basically a representation of a certain aspect of our data ecosystem, whether it's delivering it to internal Coast Guard user or CBP, it should be the equal experience, right? There should be enough fidelity in that transfer that they can consume that information and operate on it. But it's a two-way street, right? Data, I saw a great presentation yesterday. There's DevSecOps and then there's data ops, right? So there's this world that I don't think many people are talking about, which is this continuous improvement on data delivery, which requires a product mindset. And the downstream users of that give you bug reports, right? They give you feature requests just as much as a software application would. And your data teams need to be able to triage those requests and build that into the next version of their data product. And I think that's how you get to this. It's like that little incremental change on how we look at data is how we get to this larger sharing ecosystem. So that's step one. And step two is to break down the walls of and I would say they're artificial walls of government security, right? So we kind of put, especially in the unclassified domain, we put a lot of //les, for example, right? And // this, // that. And, CUI has 32 different categories and nobody really knows what's CUI, what's not CUI. It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
So everything becomes CUI. If everything's CUI, nothing's CUI.
Right.
It's kind of weird. Don't mention NSS. But there's all these weird designations that cause artificial sharing restrictions. I think we need to figure out how, this is not our job, right? This is big. We got to figure out how to operate correctly amongst ourselves to properly either cleanse the data if it is sensitive and I need to bring it to a certain level, or identify that data has this classification to it, right, or categorization. And then when I share it, that passes through. Because basically when you share data, you're giving away that information, right? You have no control over that information. So that's part of this journey as well, is like, how do we make it smoother to identify and then keep track of that information as it goes through the various pipelines.
All right. Well, if anyone has a question, please, right here, right in front.
Mike right here. Hang on. I'm going to hold the mic. I learned something from Jason.
Just call.
Okay, yeah. Abby Smith with Integral Federal. So in all of the stuff that you're doing with the cloud and your data migration, how are you guys addressing your application modernization and migrations? Because I know you guys have enterprise apps as well as smaller apps at like the logistics commands. So how are you guys addressing those things? Because I know that some need updates.
Just a couple. There's a couple strategies out there, right? So there's the strangler pattern, which I don't like the verbiage of that, but basically what it means is you take this legacy app and you start pulling features or big components of it out while still keeping a synchronization pattern there. I think we're into that because we're not going to be able to light switch our law enforcement application, for example, right? So we're currently doing that pattern right now. The difficulty in that is that data synchronization piece. So as you build your new feature component, which used to live over here, you're collecting different data, perhaps, maybe more data with more fidelity, right? You still need to provide a portion of that back to the legacy application, sort of do a reverse ETL, right? So you're repackaging that information back into the original database so that users' dependencies down here, which might require that information to do their job, actually can do that. That's a very difficult process when it comes to modernization. That's the thing I'm really keen on doing, because there's an infrastructure solution there, right? This reverse ETL thing. There's investing in platforms that think that way, right? So there's platforms that are like, hey, just build my thing over here and it's over there. And then there's platforms that actually understand that no, there's no such thing as an isolated app. We're building an actual ecosystem, and that ecosystem is actually a data ecosystem, right? It's actually at the data tier. The app is just a portal to the information, right? It's really just an interface layer. The data is what's important. And when I say data, I'm talking about records, right? Items, whatever you want to ascribe to that thing that you're collecting in the application. So that's one problem. The second problem is training. So as you're building new applications and even doing this pattern that we just talked about, people might be using this modern app over here and then going back to the legacy app over here. You've just doubled their cognitive load because they have to deal with these different experiences that they're dealing with. And I think the longer you do this modernization work, the more frustrated users will get because they're like, I don't like this anymore. I really like this one, right? Hopefully, if you're doing this well. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the development team to finish the development. So I think we're going to realize that situation, which the enemy to all this is time, right? So if you can get to market fast on a modern solution, and you can abstract away all the complexity of that because you have good infrastructure, you'll probably be successful. I think what is end up going to happen is we're going to get to a point where we've built really good component experiences, and we're just expanding those components, right? So you might have a sliver of a feature, and then you turn that into a more broad feature. So case management is a good example. You know, we did our migrant interdiction application. We did that from flash to delivery in 6 months, which is incredible speed for us. I think that's going to half this year, and it's going to half next year, right? In terms of getting to the hands of the operator, right? As we get more proficient at this. Well, that worked really well for migrants. What if that's one of our law enforcement missions, right? What about fisheries enforcement, and what about drug enforcement, right? They're kind of the same, but kind of not. Could we take that same app and just build, stretch it horizontally a bit to include those other use cases, those other viewpoints, and we're still operating at the same look and feel and experience without having to build yet another app, right? And I think that's the journey we're going down right now. Is like, hey, let's show a really good use case here, and then let's expand that out, iterative development to cover more of the requirement space. Did I answer your question?
Just to illustrate the number of apps that the Coast Guard has, I saw that you embarked on a project to update your culinary services app recently. I saw that release. Didn't know that. Question right here.
Got one right here.
I love the one pager they put. If you haven't seen it, go to My Coast Guard, the mycg.uscg.mil. That's our news portal. Do the RSS feed on your device if you want to stay up to Coast Guard news. The one pager that they put on that is awesome. I really love it. And what I really like about that when you read it is the advertisement to the user. We said right to the culinary specialist, we said, here's how we're going to solve your problem. You've been dealing with this for 2 decades, all this problem that you have with ordering food and delivering a good service, a good quality to your customers, right? Which is Coasties, right? And here's how we're going to make your life better. It was beautiful. I loved it. I want every app to have that level of advertisement for us, right? It should be such an anticipation that I'm going to get something great and actually deliver something great. That's that second piece is the hard piece, right? That people are begging us to go do me next, right? Modernize me next. And I want to have that level of pull from the organization when we're doing this work.
Hey, my name's Matt Little. I'm from SHI International, and I love your vision. You're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, which is great. Can you talk about the internal dynamic of working with your procurement office to make sure that they understand your needs and are supporting you and getting out to industry, finding the best solutions, making sure that those can catch up and be with you on your timeline?
It's a great question. Thank you. And I wanted to address that. So in the Force Design 28 executive actions, please read those if you haven't. Again, coastguard.mil. Or uscg.mil. In those actions is a modernization of our acquisition and contracting experience. One of the key tenets of that is to use existing authorities and existing pathways that get us from requirement to awarded contract in months. And that includes commercial solution openings, which there is a pilot program open right now from DHS PARM for maritime capabilities. It's a huge scope. If you haven't heard about that, search for it. Look at it on LinkedIn. Robert Borka has posted it several times on LinkedIn. They're still looking for submissions for that. So that's the Commercial Solution Opening Pilot Program for DHS. The other options are SBIR and STTR. right? So the small business innovative research and the technical research. Those are opportunities for us to take a a successful phase 1 and 2 opportunity, bring it into phase 3, or continue a phase 3 award pattern. If you have an SBR, that's a short circuit way for us to take your great capability and put it in the hands of the operator. I mentioned HSWorks. That is absolutely a procurement pathway I'm interested in curating. It's a way to get maybe non-traditional technology into a government space. That's the stated mission for the Works program. So if you're like, I think this might be a fit, or it still needs a little bit of innovation on the government side, that's a great space to bring the work stuff in, which is why I started with AI. And then the last piece is using existing contracts from other organizations. All right, I do a lot of reimbursable agreement awards off the Defend A program, for example. It's an existing vehicle. I can work directly with the downstream provider of that service, the vendor, and the closing of that is measured in weeks in terms of turnaround. And the reason why it's so successful is because of the speed, right? And I can buy small and grow instead of having to worry about this very complicated contract structure that I'm spending months on. I can just go in, trial the capability, which I've done several times, and if it doesn't work out or it's not something that we're interested in, I just stop, right? If it is something we're interested in, we continue growing. And I think that sort of proof of outcome is what we're really looking for in the contract space, right? It's like, show me what you got, show me you can get it in the hands of the operator, and the outcome of that is continued awards, right? And that goes for the software space too. 6 months to MVP. If you don't hit your MVP targets, it's probably not going to go well, right? And so it's putting this pressure on speed to market, which I think industry would encourage as well, because you guys don't spend years on something and never see a return on it either, right? So definitely see it as a collaborative experience in the technology world. We get the benefits faster, and you guys get to show your worth, right? Show that you're doing the job for the government. And so that's the goal of that whole enterprise.
More questions?
All right. Well, we're almost back on track here, but I know we went a little off script. Was there anything that you haven't mentioned that you wanted to leave the audience with before we end up?
Yeah, I can't leave a ATARC event without talking about Zero Trust. So let's be another hour. No, just kidding. No, so Zero Trust is still on our minds, right? 2027 is coming very fast. That is the DoD deadline. The DoD CIO has said in no uncertain terms, we will require that goal to be met, right? Period. End of story. If you don't meet it, you're probably going to be in serious trouble, or you're just going to be isolated for the network, right? We still have holes in our Zero Trust architecture that need to be filled. That is especially true in the data pillar. Looking for a lot of options for DLP, DRM, being able to do automated tagging, classification, data discovery. Those are all very key aspects of our pillar that we're kind of missing right now. And part of that is because the requirements to get into the DoD space sometimes leave a lot of those advanced features behind in the commercial world, and we haven't been able to leverage them. So being able to, my preference obviously would be to bring a solution in that's ready to go, right? SaaS solution that's IL4/5 rated, ready to go. I can connect it in, or an easily deployable managed solution if it gets me to that place faster while you're waiting for your IL4/5 designation. So this year we've done a couple of SaaS uplifts. So we started with a managed solution, and then we're moving to a SaaS solution. Same platform, just they got their IL4, and we're going to convert over. So I want to repeat that pattern if we have to get the capability in now, and then uplift later. That's a big strategy for me. But those are like key missing pieces. Identity is a constant problem, especially at the edge with they're calling like tactical networks, right? So that bringing Zero Trust to our platforms. Speaking of that AI services at the edge, right? Something's got to authenticate you, right? If you're disconnected, or the agent. So being able to do that, and then growing our API ecosystem. So we are kicking off our Coast Guard Cafe effort in earnest right now. That's our API modernization. We're actually going to be presenting next week on the 3rd at the Tech Summit, so that'd be fun. And then that is to me, that's unlocking a gateway of this further abstracting of the complexity away from the actual infrastructure. So those are like key investment areas for us for Zero Trust to help push that along. But I know Tom's giving me the hook here, so I gotta.
So aggressive, Tom. Well, you've left us a lot to think about and a little tease there at the end. So thank you again, Jonathan, for the great discussion.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Justin, great job on the fireside chat. Tell everybody at Fed News Network. I think you're on your 25th anniversary, I heard. And looking forward to that celebration. Yep,
Sweet.
good stuff. We're going to take a little break, grab some food, get some more coffee. We'll get you back here in a few minutes. Folks, we're going to get things going. If everybody can migrate to their seats, fill up their cup of coffee, we're going to get things going in a couple minutes. All right, if we can get to our seats, we'll get the next series of presentations. Okay, we're going to find out a little preview of what's going on in the ATARC's Fraud Detection Working Group. And presenting, we have Dr. Rebecca Shea, Director of Forensic Audits and Investigative Service at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, GAO. And then Bobby Duffy, Vice President, Public Sector, Enforce AI. And Bobby and I were going down memory lane. I think we've known each other, what, 25 years? Yes, yes. Yeah, we're installing circuits.
There you go. Well, good morning. Thank you, Tom, for the introduction too. On behalf of Rebecca and I, we're super thrilled to be here. A little bit about myself, Bobby Duffy, 35 years civilian service, retired, two-time federal CIO. As part of that, I was able to support two Inspector General's offices, the Postal Inspector General and the Department of Homeland Security. So I'm very familiar with the work of IGs, and not just on the Abuse and Mismanagement Act, but the fraud contingent. Supporting the missions was one thing, but also being a participant, a consultant to a lot of system audits. So it's great. I'm a co-chair. It's great to have Rebecca here. She brings a ton of experience and different perspective from GAO, who's really helped us with our first deliverable. And I hope we have a copy of the white paper here. So with that, Rebecca, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, testing. Yes. Okay. Thanks. I'm Rebecca Shea. I'm a director in GAO's forensic audit and investigative service team. And full disclosure, even though we have criminal investigators in our team, I'm actually on the audit side. So I am the cat in the doghouse today. But I think it's important to let you know about that perspective. On the audit side, we are focused a lot on the prevention side of fraud and what the agencies, the programs are doing to better prevent the fraud that ultimately will wind up coming to the investigative side for detection and response. As we all saw in COVID, when prevention fails, when agencies don't have those controls in place that they need to do, it can be overwhelming to try and investigate your way out of that. So better prevention will cut down on the pay and chase and also support, better use of investigative resources. So that is a lot of the focus that I have and that I also brought to the fraud detection working group.
Thank you, Rebecca. So let's talk about the current state of our working group. We started our journey actually in January. We struggled. The first thing we struggled is, what is fraud? If you ask an IG attorney, they'll say U.S. Title 18. You ask an auditor, they will probably say misrepresentation. A criminal investigator, deception. An IT system administrator, they'll say sharing a privileged account for unauthorized access. Fraud is greedy. Fraud loves free money, but overall, fraud is complex. The definition we came up with that's in our white paper is quite simple, but listen to the latter part of it. Fraud is a deliberate act of deception for unlawful gain. Thriving where programs at scale, speed, and ambiguity with inconsistent controls. I think Sonny talked about some operations at scale, right? And the challenges, what he's going through at certainly edge computing. So everything we're kind of talking about, wow, it's thriving in this market of AI, machine learning, and quantum and edge and what have you. Some key elements of fraud, what we came up with: intent, deliberate deception, not accidental errors, misrepresentation, false statements about qualifications, activities, or expenses, financial impact, improper receipt or use of grant money. We're excited we talked about grants because we're going to talk about our use case of what the team came up with right now of looking at grant fraud for entities. And unauthorized benefit, personal gain, or non-approved expenditures. Some examples of fraud: falsifying financial records or progress reports, fintech, billing or non-existent expenses or inflated costs, Medicaid, using grant funds for personal gain or for personal expenses, and misrepresenting organizational security or credentials, and double billing across multiple grants. Common themes and examples of fraud. Ladies and gentlemen, fraud is not a use case. It's a predictable outcome when speed, scale, and ambiguity collide. It's the perfect storm. Our job is to remove this ambiguity and add real-time friction where it matters most. Now let's pivot to some fraud detection techniques. AI, machine learning. AI moves beyond rigid rules. It does an excellent job of that, right? It learns from models from the past, fraud, right? And adapts to new schemes and flags risks in real time. Anomaly detection. The root cause of abnormal behavior is anomaly detection. It spots behavior outside the norm, patterns, stats, timing, volumes, things like that, before it becomes synthetic fraud. Predictive modeling scores claims, transaction by fraud, likelihood, letting agencies focus on resources at risk at its highest. Biometrics and behavioral signals, verify identity with fake voice or typing moving patterns. We heard about this with Sonny's presentation. Harder to fake even with stolen credentials. Deepfake defenses. AI models detect manipulated media combined with behavioral and device signals and stop impersonation at scale. The key thing with this, folks, is data first prerequisites. Data validation, data tagging, data quality, data cleansing, taking data swamps to AI ready states. You hear about all this stuff, but that kind of comes to the bottom line where we want to detect fraud with consistent controls, not inconsistent controls. That's the foundation of accurate AI that can reduce the blind spots and, most importantly, eliminate the hallucinations. We'll stop here with detection. I'll turn it back over to Rebecca to talk about some of our mitigation controls and talk about the framework we used to identify the grant fraud use case.
Thanks, Bobby. All right. So I think we all know that analytics, it's critical for us for better fraud prevention and detection. But to unlock that promise, you heard a lot about this already, particularly from Commander White. To unlock that promise of machine learning and AI use for better fraud prevention, we need better data. There are a lot of current limitations. You've heard some of these. I think it, doesn't hurt to reinforce. a lot of times the data are just not collected by the programs, by the agencies. They're not standardized. They have different definitions. One of the most common recommendations that we make in our audit work is, after, conduct a fraud risk assessment, know what your risks are, is to collect and use data for data analytics. I mean, almost every agency we look at, they aren't doing that in a way that could enhance like basic analytics, but also AI analytics. Also, the data tend to be siloed within an agency, not even shared, within a particular agency, but also across agencies and levels of government. And they also tend to reside, in certain cases, in legacy systems that impede the sharing that's needed to unlock that promise of AI. Now, despite all the variations in data, the fraud threats themselves are fairly consistent, known. Bobby mentioned a number of them across the range of programs. And there have been actions to standardize some information. And there have been really good examples of agencies, agencies and oversight entities that have brought data together to detect and respond to fraud. For example, GAO developed an ontology of fraud. Based on about 200 civil and criminal fraud cases, we identified the key components of federal fraud schemes, the targets of the fraud, the participants, including the fraudster, the mechanisms used to commit the fraud, the types of fraud, and the impacts of the fraud. In the ontology, we illustrate all of those elements and their relationship to one another in the form of an ontology that can be readily adopted with an AI tool to understand all the elements of fraud. So there are definitions out there. We also made a recommendation in that report to OMB to, with the OIGs and the agencies, standardize the definitions and collections of fraud data so that we could get to a place where we're delivering on this promise of AI with better standardized data. There are also efforts by the PRAC and COVID fraud enforcement task forces on the oversight side, the investigative side, to bring a lot of data together across agencies to identify and investigate fraud. Treasuries do not pay also on the prevention side, on the program side. They bring data together to identify improper payments and potential fraud risks. All of those things are very good things, and they operate to some extent, a little bit in isolation. So a broader and a cross-cutting approach that brings together the program, oversight, private enterprise could help drive progress. And that is one of the key goals of our working group. Now, of course, as we note in the white paper, that approach needs to be risk-based. Not all risks are equal. It depends on who's committing the fraud. Are we talking about organized criminal enterprises, foreign threats, or are we talking about the individual opportunist fraudster? There are obviously, risk investments that we need to make based on the damage that those different groups can do. Impacts are also another key risk factor. Financial, obviously, everybody thinks about that. We want to make sure we're preventing the significant dollar loss from fraud, but there are also many non-financial impacts of fraud, threats to national security, to health and safety, to environment, among others, reputational risk. So we need an approach that is risk-based also. Now, on the solution side, as we talk about in the white paper, there are three things that you need. I think Commander White also talked about these. We need the tools and resources. And this is where the public-private partnerships really can help us out. We need to standardize the definitions. This is where, using GAO's ontology and other standardized structures can help support within and across agencies, and then also up and down the chain. When we think about grants, we know that's a distributed funding mechanism. Federal dollars flow down. There are fraud risks at every level of that chain, and it's important for us to think about standardizing data, standardizing the collection of data down that chain so we can better identify fraud as our federal dollars flow downward. And then the last thing, obviously, training. Fraud evolves, technology evolves. So should our ability to understand and adapt. Now, we all know fraud actors, they can adapt and adopt new tools much more quickly. They're not constrained by the same things that we are. And bureaucracy moves at a fairly slow pace. And this is where the partnership with, again, private sector, I think can help us be a little bit more agile and help us get more positioned quickly to adapt and adopt new technologies. But government, we still need to have the understanding of the fraud threats and the understanding of the tools and technology to drive those requirements. So the partnership is absolutely critical there, and the training on both sides is critical. Now, those actions, obviously, they're gonna better position us for better position us for seeing the promise of AI for fraud detection. But with the white paper, we didn't want to leave it there. We didn't want to say, here are the problems and here are some solutions. We wanted to take it a step further, and that's what our use case aims to do. Now, we wanted something also that highlights a lot of the issues that I just described that have been talked about today, the siloed nature of data, the fairly consistent fraud threats, and then also can demonstrate a really good ROI or return on assets employed, as we talk about in the white paper. In one area that illustrates the challenges that, and Bobby noted a number of these, is federal grants. And I know there are a number of different kinds of federal grants out there, the formula, block grants, discretionary grants, but there are consistent fraud risk across, all of the different kinds of grants and across different programs. That said, all of the programs tend to have different approaches, siloed programs, siloed ways of looking for fraud risks. A lot of them have different levels of sophistication in that too. Obviously they follow basic, checks for eligibility and for identity, but there are a lot more sophisticated fraud risks that exist in the grant space also. We have beneficial ownership concerns, we have concerns with foreign influence and investment, and then also we can have Phoenix entities when we're talking about giving grants to businesses. The siloed review of grants is also a place where our use case can demonstrate the high value of cross-analysis. So, risks like duplicate benefits, fraudsters targeting multiple programs, undisclosed relationships. If you're just reviewing grants in a single program, in a program space, you're not seeing how that entity or that grantee is, being awarded across the government. And if that awardee is foreign, fraudulent, a beneficial owner with significant risk, like, sanctions risk, you will not see those connections. You will not be able to see those patterns. So elevating, the analysis and elevating that look to have that cross-cutting approach can help us identify some of those more pernicious risks that we might see out there. Now, the investment, it's not a significant investment, and it also is a very target-rich environment. The government awards over $1 trillion a year in grants. So there's a very significant potential there for the ROAE, the return on assets employed for this use case. Now, our use case is going to start with publicly available data, because that's what's available. Obviously, it's not the final solution, but it's a really good way for us to explore the feasibility and the limitations of this approach that we can then extend when we have access to additional data sets. We can find, what are some pockets where we need more information, or the information that we have that's publicly available maybe isn't sufficient for our needs. We can leverage also GAO's ontology for the standardized definitions of fraud and use the typologies of the schemes to help the AI, learn and understand what are all the risks that are out there. It helps leverage and partner with the private sector AI practitioners for that expertise. And then obviously, over time, we will continue to refine this and develop from there and explore the potential and limitations. But we think the use case is really going to help deliver on the issues that we raised in the white paper, and that the group has talked about. As Bobby said, it was difficult at first, but I think we finally came together at the end.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. What is the biggest surprise before you got into this endeavor and going through all this that you've discovered about fraud and what you've learned in the working group that could just kind of surprised you? Both of you can. Yeah.
First, I'll turn to Rebecca. Again, it's siloed approaches. It's disparate data systems. It's some IGs were doing some decent work on the analytics, the hyper automation, but we're not talking to each other. There was some of that going on. There was a disconnect sometimes between the federal IG community, SIGI, and GAO. There's some best practices right there. So I thought that was a challenge right now. Now, being in IT, I would kind of bring this together. And this was great about the ATARC fraud working group. right? This is the first of its kind to bring not only the public and partnerships together, but bring some awareness together too, right? And let that AI assist or AI agent be your friend. How could they help us through this, right? As part of the ROI that we're doing, the grant fraud use case, we selected agentic AI because it's focused. It'll give us immediate return on investment. We could build that model. This model can be used for any type of fraud. This fraud applies for highly in HSS, FEMA, DHS, VA, right? So that's why we selected it. We could tell that we could have a very focused AI to just summarize USA spending, the OIC sanctions list, DOJ's website, right? To see where the bad actors and the illicit actors are right now, and just see if we could identify potential fraud. That's key. So think about that, right? Think about a proof of concept, not a clickable prototype, not system one development. We're not at that milestone yet. We're not even there yet. So this is supported new executive order, right? With AI innovation. This is innovative right now, and bringing some transparency to our process. And now we could have that conversation on fraud.
So I think the silos were maybe not so new to me, but maybe the biggest surprise for me was the delta between what we see in our audits of programs and the level of sophistication and technology that they have, and then what we saw in some of the demonstrations from private sector and the level of sophistication that exists out there. There is an enormous, enormous delta. And we need to get better on the government side with that. It is inexcusable, quite honestly, with where we see many of the agencies.
Great. Well, thank you for your great work, and we appreciate a round of applause for our working group, Rebecca and Bobby. Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. I was thinking, I feel like I'm going down my entire career, and just in experiencing all this with so many people. The next topic, we have Jim Coyle, who's a public sector CTO of Lookout. That kind of brings me back to mobility. We started really, ATARC started around mobility and then kind of went into cloud. But I just think of Amara's law. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically, in the beginning, this technology seems wonderful, this new technology that comes out. Then you go through a trough of disillusionment, and then it just gets to be everywhere. I look at mobility that way. Sonny was talking this morning that they're starting to do mission applications on their phone. Just think, we went to smartphones and, beyond BlackBerry, basically. That was in 2011. I wrote an article for Information Week in 2012 about how, Jack Bauer and CTU, Chloe's going to be an assistant on your phone, and you're going to do all that. It's taken a long time to do this. So government is really using their phones. Your phones are the most personal thing you have. That's where your secrets are. It might not be in your corporate email, but it could be in your texting and your chatting. And it's really, really important. And now that we're really putting mission systems on the phone, we've gotten beyond that. So Jim Coyle is coming up. Where's Jim? We have Jim. Event team. There he is. Okay. I thought we lost you there for a minute. Jim usually does these things. He's very experienced in a lot of ATARC stuff. I believe he's going to come up here and scare us about our phones, right? Is that the plan? Well, welcome. So we're going to do a tech talk. Want to welcome Jim Coyle. This is 7.5 minutes, and it hasn't started yet, so you're good. Okay. Thank you. Welcome, Jim.
All right. Morning. Let's see. Do I have a clicker? Yes, I do. Hey, check that out. All right. So I always typically start these talks where I always want to talk a little bit about where am I collecting all this data and where's all this stuff I'm talking about. But then more importantly, not just going to go down the path of what we're seeing, but also more importantly, what you can do about it. So first things first. So if you're not familiar with Lookout, we've been around since 2007, oddly enough, right around the same time iPhone really started taking off. That's because our founders very quickly identified that the iPhone and smartphones in general were going to enable people to start to modernize their workforce, start to modernize their policies, procedures, everything that they do from a day-to-day tasking can all be done from their phones. So today, we've got about 235 million devices that are providing us back telemetry. Now, this is all anonymized. We've got this massive privacy statement. We're not, out there, stealing every piece of information. But the important piece of what we're looking at is how threat actors are connecting to these various different devices. Now, we've also done the reverse engineering and the analysis of over 401 million apps. This actually just ticked over the weekend. And yes, there are that many applications that are out there in the mobile world. So it gives us a really good idea of what malware looks like, what risk looks like. When TikTok became, the big thing to talk about, there were a lot of folks out there. TikTok was at the tip of the spear. At the time, we were tracking over 9 million other applications that were connecting back to China. So that was just, one app out of those 9 million. So from a risk standpoint, not just from a patch management perspective, not just from a data holding perspective, but we're able to answer the question, are you okay with accepting the level of risk of all these other apps that are out there that could exist on the device that could be leaking data back into China? Now, we've also done a really good job at looking at phishing sites, malicious sites, but then kind of going into, like fraud and abuse on URLs, right? You talk about all the smishing and stuff that's happening these days. This is where a lot of that information is coming into us. But we're taking a look and seeing, okay, from a URL perspective, what's malware really kind of look like? What's a phishing page look like? I hate the term quishing, but QR code phishing. What does that look like, right? You go to a restaurant, especially post-pandemic, you get, QR codes for the menu nowadays in most website or most restaurants today, at least the ones I go to. And so, 9 times out of 10, it's a legitimate, QR code, but every once in a while you get one scanned and we actually get, a little pop-up that says, hey, this is, malicious. And in the back end, we can go and take a look and see why. But all of that information, we've got a whole team of threat intelligence analysts that are looking at this stuff. And so because of a lot of the work that they do, I now get to tell you about all the cool stuff we get to see. Now, again, we've been doing this since 2007. So we've been collecting a lot of data. We've been doing a lot of the analysis, and we have a pretty good idea of what's going on globally. Now, we've got a whole bunch of people who are attacking devices. In fact, I'm a former Google Mandiant FireEye guy. We released an APT 41 report a couple of years back. We always kind of said, all right, really great, Chinese nation state sponsored threat actor. They really know what they're doing. And we always kind of figured, well, they're targeting individuals. We just don't know how. Well, coming to look at 4 years ago, what was really kind of interesting is seeing that, hey, these guys were actually started their careers attacking mobile devices 10 years prior. So now we're talking about an entire tactic shift of a threat actor, not only by a decade, but the fact that they know mobile better than anyone else in the world at the time, and we had no idea. And so these are the types of things that, that's really important to really kind of understand what happens when you do allow mobile devices to start being a part of the modernization effort. Now, there's a whole bunch of different groups that are out there. We've got everything from APT groups. We've got your run-of-the-mill scammers who are out there. We've got a lot of cybercrime groups. But the important piece is there are multiple avenues in order to target a device. Everything from 0 days on the operating system to the applications that exist, software supply chain attacks through acquisition of applications or SDKs. But then you get into the whole world of phishing, quishing, vishing, everything else around ishing. But being able to target an individual. Now, in 2023, I spent a lot of time talking about that the world is in this identity crisis. And nothing's changed, sadly. When you take a look at, in fact, Mandiant just had their cyber defense conference down in DC earlier this week. Roughly about 50% of the attacks that they're responding to all started from various avenues of targeting mobile devices through either vishing, smishing, messaging, mobile applications, or 0 days. And so that says quite a lot. But what's interesting is they're targeting the individual, because the individual has some kind of connection back to, the where they work, their place of employment, whether it's information, whether it's additional access point, whatever the case is. The important piece there is where attackers are looking from an adversarial perspective and how they're getting in is now starting at that mobile device. So it's not just malware. It's not just phishing. We're also looking at surveillanceware. In fact, we worked with Citizen Lab to first identify Pegasus and how it got loaded onto the phone. We helped them identify Trident, which was a multi-exploit chain, in order to break in the phone and do zero-click capability, meaning all somebody has to do is place a phone call or a text message. It contains zero data, but that was enough in order to get Pegasus onto a mobile device. Now, when we start talking about commercial surveillanceware, there's a ton of vendors that are out there. In fact, most malware today actually has a lot of the capabilities that surveillanceware also has. In fact, if you go to GitHub, I think at last count, there was about 36,000 different pieces of malware that were all free, that had the same capability. You just had to trick the user using social engineering or phishing in order to load the malware. Surveillanceware, it's a little bit different. It's mostly faced around 0 days in order to get deployed. But this is something that we take a look at and we build those protections into the mobile capability as well. I did mention a whole bunch of APT groups. If this is something you're interested in, I've got a little bit about a minute left, so I'm not going to spend too much time on here, but needless to say, we've been doing a lot of geopolitical tasking depending on customers and what's going on in the world. But it's been really kind of interesting to see some of these players hit mobile devices. Now, all said and done, the one piece that I do want to leave you with is, hey, guess what? There is protections in place. So whether you're using mobile devices for evidence collection, for communication with various different teams, interagency communications, there is a capability that exists in order to protect the stuff that's happening on a mobile device. Now, we're not an MDM, we're not policy managers, we're not going to provide remote wipe capability, but what we are going to do is enable the protection of the device to ensure nobody's going to break into the device, into the stream of communication, and ensure that whatever's on there doesn't leak out into the hands of folks that you don't want it to. More importantly, especially around evidence, and if you're doing big casework, you don't want that getting out into the press. This is stuff that we can definitely help out with. In any case, time's up, but if you're interested and want to learn more, we're over there in the back corner. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for that. Just one question before you get out of here. You've been doing this now for a while, right?
Yeah.
What is the nature of the threats has been changing just recently? How is AI kind of like those kind of threats affecting things?
AI has been really kind of interesting. So you no longer get, the Saudi prince who's got a whole bunch of money and he's been kicked out of the country and he needs, your help to send a check and, he'll give you millions, right? So now we've actually started to see perfection of SMS phishing capabilities. The large language models that are getting utilized today to perfect phishing is getting really, really difficult in order to detect between a legitimate message. Now, from an offensive capability, the only thing that we've really seen from an AI perspective, and this is kind of interesting from the earlier talk when they were talking about data tagging and understanding the various different data sets for zero trust, we have seen malware already perfect that. We've already seen them in order to exfiltrate the data that they're looking for. They're using AI to look and say, okay, I've now landed on an environment. I want photos of weapons, aircraft, seacraft, troops, anything that looks military. I want those images. I want it downloaded. And then I want to then sort it so I can now understand this is a person of interest and this is data I want to go after. But having said that, that's about the extent of AI that we've seen from an offensive capability in the mobile world.
Well, thank you. Very interesting.
Thank
Always
you.
good to have you. Next, we have the energetic Bill Hackley, the Federal Sales Engineer Manager for Civilian FSI Rubric. I meant that as a compliment. Okay. Do you want the mic or you want to go be a podium?
Let's get a clicker.
Yeah.
So usually you say my mic. I can't touch it. I know, this is great. Let's see. If I hit next here, am I not close enough? Let's try this again here. I don't know. Is there someone? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe we're there. Oh, and it did a little bit of a spoiler alert. Oh man. All right. Let's. There we go. Okay. All right. So what we're here to talk about today is recovery, and mainly cyber recovery, right? So a lot of people think about in the cyber world, it's prevention, it's detection, it's mitigation, it's prevention, but we like to say that bad actors only have to be right one time. And if they're right one time, what's your next step, right? Next step is you have to recover. So hopefully everyone's here today for Sunny. And Sunny actually had an interesting comment. He was talking about a mission critical app for CBP called ACE. ACE is the cargo application that looks for, cargo on the ships and all that. And he said, hey, if there is a 45-mile plume above his data center, how does he recover that application? So yes, that's a real world example. Hopefully that's never a real world example, but what we think is the real plume is a cyber attack. And the cyber attack's not a 45-mile radius. Now it's everything, right? So what can you do to recover from a cyber attack? So, and again, this did a little bit of a spoiler alert. So I was going to say, does anyone remember about 2 years ago, the city of Dallas had a really major ransomware attack, right? So hopefully everyone kind of remembers that, right? So what I did is I went and I pulled up the report. So they put out an after action report, kind of essentially what they had to do to go through this whole cyber recovery and what they went through, right? So with that cyber report, what I did is I put together a little bit of a timeline. So I think this would be kind of fun to walk through a timeline and kind of like a real world example. So they were obviously operating business as usual, right? So they think everything's great. And then what they determined was April 7th of 2023, I believe, and you can fact check me on that, but April 7th is when the bad actor got in, right? Now, granted, they sat dormant, right? It's all about dwell time. So, and the way they got in, it was a credential compromise. So it wasn't some sophisticated Russian hacker, finding a hole through the firewall. It was a phishing attempt, like we were just kind of heard in the last session, right? So phishing attempt, credential compromise, they got in. Once they got in, these are the things that they did, right? So they obviously injected their malware, still sat dormant. They then lateral kind of looked around the network, figured out where else they can go. They looked for sensitive data so they could kind of start to export all that sensitive data. So it wasn't until May 3rd is when everything's on fire, right? So the city of Dallas, if you don't know about this, all the city services were down, absolutely everything. So we're talking like red lights blinking, law enforcement system, everything's completely down. So obviously this team goes into high alert, everyone gets rushed into the office, they go through the process to kind of realize what they have. So here's what they go through. So they first have to figure out what's the scope of the attack, right? What systems were impacted, what systems were not. And then they have to also just figure out how do they get in, what's the point of infection, how do they quarantine this malware, how do they stop it, right? And then also how do they look for sensitive data, right? So all this was going on. Now, this was all happening on May 3rd, so, almost a month after they first got into the network, right? So May 4th is when they start their very first recovery to get the system back up and running. So a little bit of audience participation here. What do you think is the first application? If you ran a city, and by the way, Dallas is the 4th largest city in the US. If you ran a city, what's the first application you'd want to get back up and running? What is it? Traffic. I mean, traffic is bad in Dallas. Any other thoughts? So that's actually a good one, identity. But number one, 911. They had to get 911 back up and running for their citizens, right? So granted, people could still call 911. The phones were up, but it was all pencil and paper, walkie-talkies, all that kind of stuff. Their system was not up and running. So how long did it take to get 911 up and running? This happened on May 8th. Yeah, May 8th it says. So they have this system called Computer Aided Dispatch, CAD. And it took them 4 days of recovery to get this thing up and running, 5 days from when the system actually went down. So what was happening, right? What they did is they were going to their backup. They did a recovery. This recovery took 6 hours. Just to transfer over the network, the ones and zeros took 6 hours. So after that, they then brought the system up. They found out that the malware, the bad code was in there. They had to throw it all away. Then they had to go back to the next clean back or next backup, did a recovery for 6 hours. They did this over and over again for 4 days until they finally got 911 back up and running. right? So just a moment to kind of pause for everyone in the room. Just think about what is your 911, right? For anyone that works at a federal agency, whatever, and could that system be down for 5 days, right? So after that, yeah, they had to do other applications. But if you look at the timeline here, right, and I need to look at it on this screen, sorry. So yeah, May 15th, their police crime system. June 2nd, police warrant system. June 13th, almost a month later, waste management system, right? So, and this is all in this report. So you can go Google this report, you can look at it. They have a timeline of all their applications and when it came back, right? So this is just underscoring the importance of a data protection tool and a data recovery tool. Which time do I have? Because the timer's up here, I believe. Okay, good. I have a little bit of time. All right, so let's talk about in your environment, things to think about, right? So one thing to think about if you are in this mode of, oh crap, my system's infected, I need to start a recovery. These are things that you'll have to ask yourself, right? First off, can your data protection solution today tell you the blast radius? What do you need to recover? What do you not need to recover? You can't recover everything. Just the laws of physics alone, you can't recover all that data and get your mission up and running as fast as you need to, right? So what's your blast radius? What's the clean point of infection or the clean point before the infection? So city of Dallas. How do you not be the city of Dallas? How do you quickly go, that's the copy that I need to go back to get my mission up and running? How do you assess what sensitive data was part of the attack? You don't want to be talking in front of Congress and saying the sensitive data of citizens got out there. So how do you kind of correlate those together? And how do you prioritize? How do you say I want 911 before I want my waste management system up and running, right? So how do you prioritize that? And then lastly, were the backups part of the attack? So fortunately for the city of Dallas, their backups were not part of the attack, but what if when they went to break the glass and they said, I need to start a recovery, and that was part of the attack too? They'd have nothing, right? So something to think about. Lastly, I'll just leave you with a little bit of, why I'm up here, help from Rubrik, what we're able to do. First and foremost, when Rubrik stores backups, we store them in a bunker in a box, hardened, secure vault. So the first question about did backups survive, Rubrik can guarantee that your backups will survive. Outside of that, it's about speed of recovery. So Rubrik is able to determine the blast radius of the attack. So we can quickly determine what machines were impacted, what machines were not. We can quickly determine the clean copy. So no more guesswork. You go into the console, you say, I want that copy, click, recover, done. We're also looking for cool things like sensitive data. We can orchestrate the mission, but a lot of great stuff, but just kind of leave you with the importance of just cyber recovery. When everyone thinks about prevention, think about what do you need to do after. So that's it. All right. Oh,
Yeah.
Mike back.
So I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So the irony is the city of Dallas, there was a CIO there, Bill Zielinski, who used to be at GSA. He ran our group about looking for grants in the building infrastructure bill because he knew it's very difficult for the city because they have so many nothing's connected and they have their own. What have you seen as a negative of the lack of collaboration? What would you advise the government to do to collaborate better so they don't have to use you, basically,
Well, hopefully they do want to use Rubrik. But, no. Yeah, I was gonna say they're not out of business. But no, I mean, I think in terms of collaboration, what I've seen the most eye-opening since I've joined Rubrik and kind of been part of this technology and part of the solution is the cyber group, and I think everyone knows the cyber group does not talk to infrastructure does not talk to cyber. But Rubrik is bridging that gap, right? Because when I talked to CISOs, even like a year ago, they didn't view a data protection solution as a cyber tool in their tool belt. They just said, I'm here to stop it. And there's that aha moment of like, oh, well, what if I don't? They just would think the infrastructure group has it. But what if they don't? What if they're not thinking in a cyber mindset? They're thinking old school legacy data protection. I can recover files and folders, things like that. That's where I think the collaboration needs to happen more and more. Great. So, yeah.
Round of applause. Fantastic job. Just exactly the right time and tone and everything. Good. If I can get my panel up, I am moderating the next panel and I can't wait to do it. I am excited about this panel. I think we'll all just sit up here. So we've got Ian. I'm going to keep the timer to keep myself straight. I'll probably ignore it though. Yeah. If we can all sit together, it's better photo ops if you sit here. And we've got Michael online. So Anyway, we have Michael working online yet? Okay.
I am here.
We've got Michael. Can you hear us okay? Fantastic. Can you hear us?
Loud and clear.
Oh.
All fives.
Okay. A thumbs up. You can hear us. Okay. Okay, great. I think that's a thumbs up. Okay, good. You're getting off mute. All right.
Yes.
Anyway, today we are here to talk about collaborative approaches to data security, which we've alluded to in a couple of the panels. Maybe we can start off with everybody kind of introducing themselves and some thoughts on this topic before I get into questions. I will leave a little time. We'll definitely leave a little time in the end. I want to interact with the folks out there. But maybe we'll start off with you, Michael, as our digital colleague today. Where in the world are you?
I am presently in Virginia, DECA headquarters, Fort Lee.
Okay, great. Your volume's a little low.
Let's try to change that. Is that
maybe you can put that up a little bit.
Is that better for you?
Thank you. Yeah, go. I think we can hear you.
Excellent. Yeah. So currently in Virginia, Fort Lee, Virginia, DECA headquarters.
Great. Do you want to kind of like open us up with, DECA? I actually did a lot of work with you all. We're going down my Tom Suter memory lane here. How have you been updating your systems and, keeping this, working with all the data that you have and keeping it secure? You touch a lot of veterans and active duty personnel and keeping their data private but how are you all collaborating on this topic?
So obviously, I think one of your previous panelists spoke of zero trust. So we're actually going down that lane as well. Zero trust and making sure we get with each of the pillars and provide solutions and implement those solutions on the network. And we've spent some time as well at looking at some of the modernization efforts that are necessary. As you imagine, DECA has been around for a while, so we have some modernization efforts underway. We also looked at what we call cybersecurity supply chain risk management. So we've looked at some S-bombs, H-bombs, some other technologies that will allow us to actually go through the eaches of the technologies that are on the network and actually pick them apart as best we can and move that effort forward. So I think from a three-pronged approach, I did like the last rubric approach, something that we need to look at as well to as we move more toward the cloud. Obviously, some of those efforts may not be necessary, but some of those things that are left behind would definitely warrant a review from Rubrik. So shout out to Rubrik.
Great. I'm sure they don't mind that. Thank you. Next, we'll go to my left with Dr. Clark. One of the things we had a little side conversation, really about your privacy. Help explain to vendors. Sometimes they don't understand your mission needs compared to cybersecurity, right?
Okay. Well, thanks, Tom. Ken Clark, U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, Assistant Director. My portfolio is the privacy program for ICE as well as the Freedom of Information Act program. It's really been good and exciting to hear a lot of the discussions about some of the technologies out there, obviously encryption, looking at how we're, the continuity of operations plans and how you're going to address that, restoration of data systems and such. On our side, we're looking at the privacy protections that are required out there, data at rest, data in transit, and then disposal, et cetera. And through the process of doing privacy to make sure that we're consistent with the Privacy Act, and of course the E-Government Act gives us mandates as far as doing privacy impact assessments and such. And that's good, but it also is good business to bring your privacy team as well as your cybersecurity team together. Oh, by the way, 853, NIST 853 emphasizes the need to look at security and privacy together. And you'll see a lot of the artifacts that we have to do in the privacy program in that standard. But doing the privacy program and the privacy impact assessments, actually, we've done a number of them in recent days for new applications, and it's a hand-in-hand activity between the program office, the chief information officer, our cybersecurity teams as well as our privacy teams, and making sure that we go through the methodology. What are we trying to do? What's the requirement? What's the tool trying to do or the system trying to do? What are the privacy protections? How's personally identifiable information transitioned and moved from one place to the other? Chain of custody for us, that's huge. That's huge for any law enforcement organization, but I also would suggest it's important for any other type of discipline. You got to know your data. You got to know where your data came from, who's been touching it, how it's being used. For us on the law enforcement side, it's crucial for getting an investigation through to a successful prosecution. But it's really the methodology that we do for the privacy program touches those areas of cybersecurity as well as privacy and gets people thinking about what's the system of systems that we're working with, and what are the controls we need to have.
Just as a follow-up, I know you also work with FOIA, and how can this industry, this new technology, and we've got a mix of government and industry here. How can they accelerate your mission of ensuring privacy?
Well, it's a good question. And, with FOIA, I mean, we do over 110,000 Freedom of Information Act requests a year. I mean, I've got a team of 50 folks trying to deal with that. I think we pushed out something like 4 million pages of records last year. So it's a huge burden. And we're looking at right now, I'm looking at, for example, some things that we can do with artificial intelligence. When we do FOIA requests, everybody takes the Freedom of Information Act seriously at ICE. I mean, it's transparency. It's letting people know what we're doing at ICE, how and trying to be as transparent as we can while we're doing our mission of doing not only immigration enforcement, but also the Homeland Security investigation side. Very busy times. And one of the things, I mean, I've personally done a Freedom of Information Act request where you have to go through your emails, you go through all your files. Sometimes it takes 8 to 10 hours of your day trying to find all that information. Artificial intelligence right now, we're looking at possibilities where it can go out and do that searching for you, come back and say, hey, we found these documents based on this type of query. You verify it, then you get it to the FOIA team, you get it out. The other thing is also the redaction capabilities, making sure that we're redacting properly for privacy, law enforcement sensitive information. Obviously, national security information, of course, is clearly part of the exemptions that we've got. But these are the kind of tools and technologies that we would like to see that the private sector could also offer.
Now, thank you for that, Dr. Clark. Next, let's go over to Ian. If you can introduce yourself a little bit about your work.
Yes, so my name's Ian Vance. I work in the Modernization Protection Directorate under the ADASM for Data Engineering and Software within the Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. So I work in the Army acquisition workforce. So our focus may be different than some of the other panelists here today. Our major focus in the last few years has been protection of digital engineering environments and data. So DE is critical. It's a critical practice necessary to support the Army modernization. And it comes with its own challenges, complexity, and dynamic threats. It's a systems engineering methodology, for those that don't know, that prioritizes the use of models and data over traditional documentation. But it also adds an additional vector by which an adversary can obtain program data and steal intellectual property to advance their own technology, or to look at our designs and then find weaknesses. So recognizing that problem, the acting ASALT recently signed policy to ensure those environments and the products of those environments, like models and artifacts, are categorized appropriately as critical technological information, which ensures the foundational cybersecurity practices are implemented at the appropriate level to protect that information. Additionally, we've investigated through a demonstrative environment the application of several COTS tools to evaluate the effectiveness with which the tools can identify, categorize, and apply policies to protect that information where it resides. And then lastly, we've recently published hardening guidance for many of the commonly used tools within our PEO communities to ensure that those tools are configured and used securely.
I know my son's a captain in the Army, and he's working overseas on some systems. And Sonny earlier was talking about OT systems, in weapons, in really the DoD's weapons systems, right? You're starting to connect to the internet. more and more and more and more to increase their capabilities. For generally for OT, I know you're in digital. Can you simulate this? I mean, how do you really protect these systems from getting attacked?
Yeah, I think from an OT perspective, and weapon systems generally are lumped into that OT conversation. We take a risk management approach, right? We look at one, what are the benefits of being connected, and then two, what are the risks? So weighing those, we make decisions whether it makes sense to connect and at what level in that spectrum of connectivity. I think that there's an increased interest in continuous monitoring with non-traditional systems, non-enterprise IT systems. So that's been a big focus area in the last few years of how do we do as close to real time as possible cybersecurity monitoring for OT systems, so that we're aware of threats, as they occur and can get into that rapid response.
Yeah. So my first question, I'll start off with you. We're going to do it's like a snake draft or something in fantasy football. What are the most effective strategies you're using to protect sensitive data? And maybe we can extend that to sharing data with other parties as well.
Yeah, I think, and it's been hit on several times today. I think knowing what your data is, where your sensitive data resides is the first step into that. So if you don't know that, that's the first thing you need to do is where is your data? What data within that large superset is your sensitive data? Labeling it appropriately, and then ensuring that you are protecting it to the requisite level.
Yeah. Again, I think when you look at securing data, there's the technical, there's the programmatic, and also just the operational side. I think on the programmatic side, the discipline that we use on the privacy program to go through working with the technology team as well as the program office. And it really almost forces a systems of integration approach and looking at really what's the system of system. Because we'll ask the question, okay, what are you connecting to? What data is going from point A to point B? And I think systems integration is something that's crucial. And I think that it's important to know all the different systems that are out there. We have privacy impact assessments that are on the internet that you can go to, dhs.gov, and you can actually see the systems, not only at ICE, but at CBP and at other mission partners. Also, I think having good acquisition practices. I mean, one of the things when we do a privacy threshold analysis, which is kind of a quick subset of the privacy impact assessment process, something to do to get out the door if there's a pilot, somebody wants to get some data, and of course we've had some pretty rapid fire requirements that have come in recently. And that really forces also us to work with the acquisition community. So making sure that we have to do a privacy threshold analysis so that they can determine whether the contract that they want to do with the vendor is going to be able to meet those requirements that we have in the PTA. So that's another thing for those that are looking to do business is think privacy. If you're going to propose an application or a tool or system, think about what the privacy questions are going to be, because that's going to be really one of the first control gates before even the contract is going to get let. You've got to do that privacy review as well as other reviews, of course, cybersecurity, making sure you're FedRAMP certified, et cetera, and that kind of thing, depending on what the application is.
Fantastic. Michael?
Yeah, I think we've had the luxury of dealing with a lot of our data being in an IL4 environment, thereby taking the opportunity not just to do a privacy impact assessment, but we have also looked at some of the opportunities of doing data tagging, some things that would actually give us the ability to do segregation of data and put it in silos, if you will, to make sure you are able to implement RBAC or whatever the case may be. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And I think as we continue to move toward, dare I say, AI and some of those investigative areas where we're just kind of tipping our toe in the water to see what kind of benefits they could be, it's becoming increasingly more important for us to understand the ramifications of putting the wrong data in the wrong, the good data in the wrong environment. So we want to make sure that we track that. So we've been doing some deep dives with various personnel here and engaging with some people at DODCI's office as well to make sure we're tracking there. We're in a specific a special area because we're retail. And not only that, some of the data that we're dealing with has to deal with our desire to actually deliver groceries to your doorstep. So knock on wood or whatever, we want to put that out there just to make sure everybody knows that DECA is trying to do what a modern grocery store would want to do. So it's pulling us on at various ends at trying to find out what data we can actually share and what data we need to keep in house, as you would imagine. So we've been doing our best to keep our efforts above water and as it were, put all our oars in the water at the same time. So thank you.
You reminded me we're starting a cyber AI convergence working group that's going to be kicking off. So you're on the cyber side, right? How is your agency using AI? And you're there to kind of like make sure that we're not going off the rails and exposing data and which is privacy and as well as security. How are you working with that and what's going on with AI in your agency?
So yeah, that's been a struggle. I think everybody, if you don't know, you'll probably know after I say it. Nipper or Nipper GPT. I think many of us are familiar with that. The opportunity here is obviously with DRP and many other things is to figure out how we can then leverage AI to make the work of our individuals a little faster, a little bit better with the absence of personnel. So what we're doing is probably in the near future, I'd say in the next 3 to 4 months, we're ramping up a test environment, something that allows us to see exactly what benefits it can bring and if the benefits outweigh the risks, and then figuring out how we can fence that off. Again, it is a challenge, and I will not say that we have figured it out. I just know that we're in the process of figuring it out, and if anybody has a really good solution, that's the reason I mentioned data tagging. I think it's going to be key in us being able to make sure that that happens in a fair way that still allows the capability to exist without putting ourselves at risk. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, but we're peering into that, and we're leveraging other capabilities at this time and trying to grow one here locally.
That's fantastic. I know it's early. The next question is, how are encryption protocols evolving to meet modern data protection needs? Who wants to handle that one? I'll just make it a free for all. Go ahead.
Well, I'll start. There was I think Sonny was talking about earlier about quantum computing and, the challenges there. Anybody seen Schrodinger's cat anywhere? Little inside quantum mechanics joke. No, quantum computing is going to be one of the challenges that we have because of, the ability now to potentially break, PKI or some of the other encryption technologies that we have. Doing multiple, hearing some of the stories that, things that take years to process now, quantum computing is going to be able to do it in minutes and hours because of the ability to do multiple calculations at the same time. So that's a challenge. And I'm glad to hear that there are agencies out there doing that. Obviously, we just heard about the president signing an agreement with the UK to start those initiatives. There's a lot of work going on in Maryland and studies, and obviously at the schools across the country. That's going to be key. The other thing on the privacy side, privacy enhancing technologies. You're looking at things like homomorphic encryption and such, where you can actually, instead of having to decrypt the entire data set and being able to actually still do calculations while it's encrypted, and that can save a lot of obviously security for data sharing and such, and that's going to be important. We're looking at what are some of those, and they're still emerging. A lot of this is still cutting edge. Quantum computing is still so cutting edge right now, but the ability to find ways to improve the data sharing capability, the speed of transferring data. I mean, I've heard some applications now where changing the stack of when you want to transfer something from one end of the country to the other, looking at the whole transportation stack that needs to be maybe reduced. So a lot of these things to try to just increase the ability for sharing information as well as protecting it.
We have a quantum group too with on post-quantum encryption. How, if I can follow up with you, is that going to be part of your modernization plan anyway? Like and maybe I can get some feedback from you too. How about I direct it to you? Yeah.
And thank you for hitting a lot of the points that I wanted to talk about. But I think another thing that is also important is similar to knowing where your sensitive data resides, knowing where you are using cryptographic algorithms is important too. And that's why, we're investigating looking at things like a crypto bomb so that we can track where those algorithms are so that we can be ready whenever there is, whenever we are preparing for that post-quantum threat.
Great. My next question is for you, Michael. And I think it's an important one. What role does risk management play in a comprehensive data security strategy? You can only put so many resources to everything. You can't make everything super secure maybe. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I would say, it depends, as everybody would say, your risk appetite. So how do we want to approach this, and at what benefit do we get from putting ourselves at risk? So we've constantly thought about, obviously being DECA, and we like to think of ourselves as being a unicorn in our environment, because we're the only grocery store for the DoD. That there are some things that we have to consider, whether or not we want to put ourselves at risk and the environment at risk, and obviously the data that resides within that confine. So we've actually looked at risk management strategies. DoD has given us the opportunity to look at what we call JRAMs and risk assessment methodologies to just drive it home. Because at the end of the day, it is what we will choose to put at risk. So we play a large part, I should say, in helping those within CTO, whether or not he's going to advance a particular capability forward, and whether or not we're going to sit down at the table and have a strategy session before we actually procure a solution. I think it's been key to actually assess the benefit, then assess the risk, and look at some of the things that the vendors could provide to us as we move those forward. If we don't do that, then just ingesting or adopting a solution without having that puts everything at risk, including the budget, right? So you're having to back channel, try to figure out if we can beg for funds, rob Peters, steal from Paul, whatever it is that you need to do in order to make it happen. And it becomes very chaotic and hectic. And sometimes you end up with solutions that aren't comprehensive. So that's the reason I would say doing a risk strategy ahead of your acquisition, and actually just moving things forward has been key, I think, for some of the better solutions we've ever implemented here.
No, I agree. I mean, right now what we're looking at is, again, it's, working with the other mission partners and seeing what kind of technologies they have, and how we can possibly leverage them. A lot of it's, the good news is that with that a lot of the agencies in the federal government now are working very closely together. We're sharing data, we're sharing technologies, we're working together on common problems. And I think that's going to help us get to the point where we can actually start leveraging some of these technologies that we need to have.
Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think risk management needs to underscore, everything that we're doing within the security space, because you have this full array of security controls available to you, but that doesn't mean that everything applies in all cases. So it starts out with the requirements of what is this system, what are the performance requirements for this system in its expected operational environment? And I think within the Army, we maybe have different than other organizations within the government. We expect more of a contested cyber environment. So we maybe have a different risk management strategy than others. But I think having that as kind of the foundational concept and then applying the right security controls to address the right performance constraints is the approach that we need to take.
Yeah, sure.
Just also to add, one of the things on the privacy side, we do have I was glad to hear in Bill's discussion about some of the, how the city of Dallas was able to deal with and analyze their problems. But we do the same thing on the privacy side. So we have a privacy incident response plan. And, anytime sensitive PII is spilled or what have you, or PII is spilled, we do an analysis, work with the individual or individuals, and then even come up the mitigation plan. A lot of times it's training programs, but it's also looking at just even where the system vulnerability. Sometimes we found some breaks in some of the system vulnerabilities through that process. So that's part of the risk management framework as well.
All right. Do we have any questions in the audience? Everybody's looking around at somebody else. Who's going to ask the first question? I can keep asking questions. Well, I'll answer the next. I'll ask the next question. I'm going to save you for last, Ken, because we're going to talk about data privacy. But how can you ensure data privacy? And let's even talk cybersecurity. How do you do these things but not impact user experience, right? Like how can I, put all these controls in place? And why don't we start off with you, Ian?
Yeah, I think again, it goes back to grounding efforts in foundational cybersecurity practices like strong access controls, data encryption, continuous monitoring. Those are the core measures that protect sensitive information from unauthorized access and breaches. By implementing, RBAC, least privilege, we can limit that data exposure, that blast radius, to only, access to, the data for those people that need it. We can balance the privacy with the need for operational agility. It further enables efficiency. We can adopt privacy enhancing technologies like anonymization of data, tokenization. That'll allow us to use data for analysis and decision making without exposing it to those performing the analysis. Additionally, we can use secure data sharing frameworks, automated compliance tools, and that'll help us streamline workflows while ensuring adherence to the privacy regulations and all the things that we have to meet.
Great, Michael.
Yeah, I would say traditionally, cybersecurity is behind whether the modernization efforts may be, and that's simply because we haven't spent the time to discuss what the modernization efforts or emerging technologies will be, right? So we need to be in that chair. So I would say expectation setting specifically for the user, because you don't ask the bank if you really only need 2 letters in your password. You don't ask that question, right? Is it okay to have 2 letters? No, you want your data to be secure. So I think there should be some expectation setting. That's the second point. And I don't think if I didn't drive the first one home, is that we need to go back to the first point, which is make sure we're in the chair when emerging technologies are actually being birthed or being brought forward, right? Not just on the tail end. So it's actually baked in and the people understand what they're getting in their hands when they receive it. It is not something that should be an afterthought, because that's truly what it is. If you're bolted on and everybody says, why did you do it this way? When it's baked in, they say, oh, it's always made this way. So expectation setting is the key.
Great. Ken, I'll let you wrap up.
Well, I have to go back to the importance of the front end processes of defining your requirements and understanding what your system is and what you're trying to do. I mean, I used to be electrical engineer. I love to see the blinking lights. I like to plug the wires in and watch the technology do its thing. But at the end of the day, in fact, Peter and I were talking, and challenges that we see sometimes is the tendency to jump out and say, okay, what are the boxes we want to connect before we even know what the boxes are supposed to be doing or what the networks are. So you really have to go through the process of what's the requirement, because most of the time we're finding out on our side when we do our privacy assessments, there's not a clear understanding of what the system is. What's the concept of operations? What data are you trying to share? That is so important, that methodology. I think that's something that's really got to be in any type of endeavor that you have, is following that good acquisition practice.
Let's go to closing thoughts. Michael, we'll start off with you. Anything we left on the table in this discussion?
Honestly, I wanted to delve into some quantum computing. And I don't know that we've actually talked about the benefits I think that could be held because of cybersecurity and how it could actually help us. So I'm actually looking forward to someone actually, discussing what that could do and how we could actually move things a little faster with quantum computing and how it would help us in cybersecurity realm. So that is something, I just have an attention or a draw for at this moment, looking for articles in reference to it. And because I believe the industry in and of itself is always leaning toward developing a new capability without thinking about the security that needs to be implemented along the way. So hopefully quantum computing makes it quicker, faster, better for everybody. I don't know, allows us to get in the chair a little quicker. And as somebody moves things forward, at least we can catch up instead of us taking years. It take us a day in order to come with a solution. Just my thoughts, but that's all I have.
Love it. Well, we got Lindsay here. She's my membership manager. She'll like send you a little link so you can get involved with that group. We are arranging a member only trip, government industry, to Oak Ridge National Labs. They have a quantum computer there. I think it's got a lot of potential. We're a little early, but it's coming along. We also, in our quantum group, we are engaged with the Air Force, and they got about $60 million in funding for quantum. Lots of things going on in that space. It's going to be a really, really neat area. Dr. Clark.
You know, it's kind of interesting. It almost feels like the space race now. I don't know those that were alive during the Apollo days and such. I mean, a lot of the excitement of what we saw on the space side, but just looking at what's going on now in information technology, data sharing, again, as Michael's talking about the quantum computing and some of the new technologies out there. But the other thing is too, is the interesting of how important it is now to have the capabilities and the technology for mobile access. You know, state and local law enforcement, our officers, you know, out in the field in some of those environments are austere. Very much, you know, data connectivity is a challenge. Of course, we have some of the technology, satellite technology, Starlink, et cetera. But just where things are going are in the mobile environment, and I think that's important too. That our vendor partners, you know, are recognizing what are the mission needs that we have, and that's the ability to, you know, for our officers to, and I even see this as even privacy enhancing. If you're able to identify an individual who are a person of interest and find out whether they really are a person of interest versus maybe somebody who is misidentified. If you can do it in the field, that's so much better than having to put somebody in the back of a car, take them in, identify them. You know, again, we're talking about civil liberties and such there. I think that the technologies in the mobile environment are going to actually increase and improve our civil liberties and privacy protections. And then also the need for interoperability. Again, we're working with the mission partners. We're working federal government with mission partners that are on the state and local side, but also even on the private sector side. So interoperability of capabilities is going to be key.
Ian.
Yeah, thanks. I think events like this are so important because I think we need to do a better job of coming together and discussing the big problems that we have. We may have different applications for the same problems, but at the heart, they're the same problems. So, you know, that's the first point is I think like this engagement is really important. I think you know, future engagement is also something that we need to think about. How can we advance what we're doing with AI and ML for threat detection and response, for identification of sensitive data across the full spectrum of where data resides, and then other things like blockchain. How can we utilize that for integrity? You know, we want to use something to maintain that integrity within our software supply chain, and blockchain could be a good application for that. So, you know, just want to hit on these are important. We need to keep doing them, and we need to further you know, drive that innovation together.
Yeah, Sonny and I were talking about the exact same issue. It's either blockchain or something like blockchain, right? That's another one that's taken a while. Murray's Law. I don't know. We haven't quite seen that develop yet. A round of applause. Great job, folks. I really appreciate your time. Great job. And now we're going to a fireside chat format. Thank you.
Hey, hats off.
And we have lunch. I see lunch got here. Make this exciting. Don't worry. I think my stomach's actually growling too, but we're going to make this exciting. So if we could sit right here. So anyway, I'm here with Peter Wynn, Acting Chief Privacy and Civil Liberties Officer, the Office of Privacy and Civil Liberties at the Department of Justice. Did I get that right?
You got it good enough.
Good. Good enough. Okay. I'm just going to dive right into it. You are the Chief Privacy and Civil Liberties Officer at Department of Justice. I think people get a little confused with privacy and cybersecurity. Are they two sides of the same coin? How are they related and how are they different?
So they're obviously related, and the last discussion with the cybersecurity folks and with Ken Clark from ICE highlights how those two ideas are really just two sides of the same coin. I like to think of cybersecurity as really focusing on information systems and the confidentiality, integrity, accessibility of those systems, the kinds of issues that the people managing those systems are focused on, which is protecting the systems from, say, unauthorized access, making sure the systems are working, and so forth. The what we call the privacy side of that equation is the human side. Okay, it's basically the people who are impacted by the information in that system, and it's important to think about both of those all the way through the life cycle of the system. Now, the problem we have had, and I want to say the problem is more on the privacy side of that equation rather than the system side of the equation. The system side of the equation, everyone has always been thinking in systems thinking, right? You're thinking about these systems as systems. And when you think about systems, you're using systems thinking. You're thinking about life cycles. You're thinking about stuff coming in, stuff going out, moving parts, relationships. The challenge we have been faced with on the privacy side of the house, I want to say, is an ideological challenge, where people have been thinking about privacy as something individuals own, the idea of individual control. When information was on paper, individuals owned the paper and they could control the information. And we talked about property, and property gave people pretty good privacy. When they can own the paper, you lock it up and you keep it in your house, and you've got all these laws protecting your property. But when information goes on systems, on electronic systems, it's more like water flowing in a river. And when you dam a river up to get electricity, you don't want to be finishing pouring the concrete before you ask how the salmon are going to get upstream. Okay? And water's good, unless it's in your basement. And information is good unless it's the name of a confidential informant in the wrong hands, in which case you may have someone who's dead. So the point of shifting the paradigm from individual control, from property and control, to trust is making sure the information is used the right way. And when you're doing that, you're thinking about relationships of trust. You're not thinking about data as a thing you own or control. You're thinking of managing relationships. And you can see this idea going right back to the development of computers. When you look at the work of someone like Claude Shannon, and he's really the founder, together with Alan Turing, Johnny von Neumann. When you look at his definition of a bit, that 0 or 1, that smallest unit, he says the smallest unit, the bit is the smallest unit of difference that makes a difference in connection with a communicative relationship. That means the smallest unit of information is not a thing, but a relationship. So you're blowing up this whole notion of an information as a thing or something that's in a person's head, which is something we inherited from people like Descartes. And we're going to relationships of trust. And when the first people came to develop what we now treat of as the Fair Information Practices Principles, the idea that if you collect information from somebody, you want to tell them why you're collecting it, and you want to make sure that if you use it for the you use it only for the purposes that you're collecting it for. If you use it for a secondary purpose, something else, you get that permission. Person has access to the information. It's not right. You want to fix it, keep it secure, and the way of holding people accountable to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. The people who developed that idea pointed out that this is a relationship of trust. It's just as much in the interest of the institution or organization as the individual. This is a mutual interest in the information. The person who came up with that idea was a guy named Willis Ware, who was a colleague of Shannon and Turing and the people and worked under Johnny von Neumann building the first computer in the 1940s and 50s in Princeton. He brought that idea in, and then when he wrote that down, everyone ignored him and said, well, privacy is about individual control. They just ignored what he wrote. And we've been stuck with and one of the other things he wrote is he said, well, you know, you could look at law enforcement and national security. You know, Osama bin Laden does not have a mutual interest in the information that the CIA is collecting about him, right? Al Capone does not have a mutual interest in the information, you know, then I guess the Treasury, but now as part of the Department of Justice, ATF, but the investigators have in him, right? That's an adversarial relationship. And the relationship of trust is not one between the subject of the investigation and the investigators. It's between the agencies conducting those investigations and the public, because the public doesn't want to make sure that that investigatory power they have isn't abused. And in a democracy, there are a bunch of principles that apply. And so Ware recognized that, and he spelled it out. But no. The people who took over this privacy conversation said, no, it's a universal principle, which meant that everybody has to get access to their information and control, and you have to get permission when you use it for something else, which is insane. And so we've been working to get out of this box that we've been put in by people who just tried mistakenly. You know, and our European friends say that this is a fundamental human right, and therefore it has to be universal and it has to be the same for everybody. And I was thinking, well, that's totally inconsistent with risk management. And when you're dealing with risk management, you're doing two things. You're managing different risks in different contexts. Everybody says privacy is a question of context, but they yes, that means that the controls, the protections you put in place are different in different contexts. And when you have different contexts, you have different stakeholders. And this is the fundamental thing that I think I want to leave you with. We've been thinking of privacy as about individuals, but you know, our individuals are independent, right? So we are focusing on risks about the independent individual, but individuals are essentially interdependent in societies, which means we need to take the basic idea of relationships of trust and think about risk in connection with the interdependence of humans. Now, obviously, individuals have an interest. They are stakeholders, but so are organizations and institutions and groups of individuals and families. So getting back to this ecological model that I started with, if you're going to get engaged in trust-based risk analysis, you don't start with this idea of individual control and fundamental rights. You know, if you say, you know, and we had this issue in ecological law. I mean, in the 1970s, when they were first starting this process, the idea that, well, you have a human right to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Well, how much clean air and clean water did that get us? None. And it wasn't until people started engaging in risk assessments and using industry standards and building groups of consensus about how much pollution we could have versus how many jobs we have, right? that we started to get clean air and clean water. And we have to do the same thing in privacy. We have to get away from this idea of a fundamental human right to data, control your data. It's not your data. You know, it's knowledge. It's knowledge about people. It's knowledge about stakeholders, and the stakeholders can be individuals, they can be institutions. So let's flip it around to the cybersecurity question. So, and you saw this in the last panel, that the cybersecurity questions that we're struggling with are ones where we're managing risk by being aware of ignorance. And so, you know, new technology, I was sort of curious, oh, quantum computing is going to come in, it's going to solve all our problems. Yeah, it's going to create a whole bunch of other problems, right? Because new technology doesn't care about whether it's good for us or bad for us. And when we're thinking about the new technology, we're only usually focusing on what's good for us. And then we discover all this stuff that's bad for us. Well, you know, you can't blame the technology. It's that humans are struggling with our own ignorance. And so, you know, you see this clearest in the cybersecurity risk response. So at the Department of Justice, we have, and I think Ken Clark was also talking about this, when we have an incident, we've integrated our incident response with our breach response. The core management team is overseen by myself and Nikki Collier, who's the CIO of the department. And we treat every significant breach or incident as an opportunity. Obviously, we're managing the risks. We're mitigating the harm. We're doing the kinds of things they did in Dallas. But we're also looking to completely review everything in our systems, including our guidelines and including our training, and everything is constantly being looked at as we're doing our response.
So, you know, traditional approach to federal breach response. I mean, I was part of the OPM hack. I'm sure a lot of people have been here. We've had a lot of federal things in the past. What do you think is a traditional approach, and how do you think you're starting to do it? Look at it now.
You know, in 2017, when the basic framework, it's OMB's M1712, was developed, I was on the group of people developing that, and I thought that was cutting edge. And it focuses almost uniquely on individual risks and mostly on the question of identity theft. And in, you know, after you go through a SolarWinds hack where the threat actor is coming from a foreign country, they're very sophisticated, they're a national security actor, you know, they're not interested in running up a bunch of credit card charges on the individuals that they've got personal information about. You know, the risks are far greater. There may be individuals who are now at risk with their lives. There may be and there are institutional trust issues at the Department of Justice, like a relationship of trust with the chief judge who oversees the grand juries when they've gotten into grand jury information and you've got a grand jury breach, right? My relationship with my opposing counsel if I'm a prosecutor, right? All of these ethical obligations are not simply individual risks. They are institutional risks. And they are really complicated, and we can't predict all of them. We become aware of them as we're crossing the river by feeling the stones in these situations, but you have to treat your ignorance as a given, which means you don't say, I mean, God bless you, Ken Clark, you know, you're getting those damn PIAs done during the procurement process, right? And we're struggling to do that at the department too. because you want to make sure it's going on 24/7. It's not just when you procure it. If you can do it, that's great, because the procurement people can start to see the advantage of this process, where the cybersecurity people and the human-centered side of this conversation are engaged in this discovery of our own ignorance early, right? But you want to keep that process going all the way through to where the systems break, and you see opportunities for continuous improvement.
Yeah. You're talking about breach response being overly individually centric. What should we be doing instead? I mean, what should we gear every instrument of the government to look beyond that a little bit, right? And look at these major things that are, grand jury getting tampered with, big stuff.
Well, you have to be joined at the hip with your information security team. And you want to be doing, I think the privacy impact assessment process is a really helpful tool that can help identify risks early. And then, first question is, what are you trying to do with the system, right? What are your objectives? What's your mission focused here? And then collecting less information may be more efficient for everybody, right? And then when you're going through that analysis, you're seeing the risks. The risks are a lot of cybersecurity risks. Stuart Baker, a good friend of mine, said privacy is 90% cybersecurity, which is generally true. But the risks associated with people getting hold of information that shouldn't be getting hold of it are multifaceted and very complicated. And the more we can identify those risks early, the more we can mitigate them. But we don't want to treat breakdowns as opportunities to blame. We need to treat breakdowns, because we can't predict everything. I looked at the privacy impact assessment I did for our email system after the SolarWinds hacked, and I was appalled at my ignorance. I said, well, who signed this stupid thing? It was me. But be in touch with the fact that that's the way it should be. We don't want to be treating this, and bureaucracies are great at blaming people. Why didn't you think of that? Well, I was doing my best. But you want to think about, try to get the risks and the stakeholders who have interest in this stuff. The more stakeholders you can involve in this process, the better, because they have more knowledge than you do.
That's why I always bring in Ken or some other privacy expert to every conversation we have, as well as acquisition. You need all the stakeholders there. I did an interview with Katie Arrington at the Canadian Embassy. Some folks were there, and she was talking about CMMC, which is basically, how do you address the risk with your third parties, the contractors holding your data that you have to work with? It's hard enough. You're talking about how hard it is to do it inside a Department of Justice. How do you do it with all your suppliers?
Well, the suppliers, it's funny. I've been working on this for about, I guess, going on about 8 years now, 8-9 years. And I started by really focusing in on our own systems, just getting a handle on what we have, right? Malcolm's, the fraud conversations earlier reminded me of a guy named Malcolm Sparrow, who's a professor at the Kennedy School at Harvard, but he used to be a Mountie, and he wrote about fraud. He said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? If you can't measure it, you can't protect it, right? And, I found all these off-the-grid systems, and it's embarrassing, but it's an opportunity. And so we started to bring all the systems under control into a central, and this is working hand in glove with the CIO, right? You don't get an ATO until you've completed your privacy review. And there are all kinds of problems, but we started to harden our systems. And then we started seeing hacks of our contractors. Well, the FISMA, which is the basic legal structure, we looked at that, and a lot of people were saying, well, we're not responsible for our contractors. And I read the FSMA to say, no, 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 we have indirect control of that. That means we own it. That means it's our problem. That means when there's a hack of our contractors, we have all the obligations we had with respect to our own systems. We absolutely do. I think that's now pretty much widely understood within the federal government, but it was a contested question. And now we've got our contractors with, you know, the contracts require procurement obligations, and what do you do about the mom and pops, and do you have to have exceptions there? And even there, you're doing sectoral risks. Well, what about third parties that you don't have contracts with? What about the courts? What about telecommunication companies? What about Microsoft when we're serving process on Microsoft? Well, these are all hacks that we've been dealing with. And FSMA doesn't apply to the courts. It doesn't apply to Microsoft. It doesn't apply to the telecommunication companies. And the challenges there are still our relationships of trust, which means we have to own the trust issues associated with our institutional trust, okay? That doesn't mean we're sending notices out to everybody, but it means we have to engage with Microsoft and the telecommunication companies and the courts, and we have to start thinking about this thing. You know, in a democracy, we're really in a system where everybody is independent, and there's a role for Congress here, because we need to start thinking about what's an efficient way to deal with these systemic risks in our entire ecosystem.
I don't have it on the question, but I was just thinking about it. How about the insider threat? That's a tough one.
Well, the insider threat, the insider threat is a tough one. The outsider threat's a tough one. The insider threat is really, I would say, a lot of what we're doing whenever we're dealing with an outsider threat. I mean, what is our response ultimately? So, you know, at the very abstract level, we have three things we can do. We can issue guidance or policy making people do certain things. We can train to make sure they're really doing it. And then we can measure to see how good our training and our guidance is working. And when we do that, we always find out there's a problem, and we revise our guidance, and we revise our training, we measure some more, okay? So that's the insider, but that's also protecting from outsiders. That the insider-outsider distinction is also something that is a little artificial. I mean, we can, I consider the problems we have with outsiders largely an insider problem. Now, people can act in good faith and people can act maliciously, but we have to measure that problem, and we begin on the inside in order to protect the outside. And there's also the human HR relationship we have. You can't make people feel like they're being spied on 24/7, but at the same time, you get buy-in from them where they see that it's just as much in their interest to do this as it, you know, it's the relationship, that's the mutual relationship we have with the institution and the individual. They share the same interest in making sure that that data is protected. So you begin with training, you begin with the right understanding of what we do, okay?
Last question. What's your greatest remaining challenges to tackle for DOJ and other agencies? What are you working on? If we do this 3 years from now, what have you been working on for 3 years?
Probably the third-party risks, because they're the ones that are most they're the biggest moving target we have. We revised our guide, you know, we've merged the breach response with the incident response process, so that the process is controlled mutually both by the CIO and my office. And we've just added a section dealing with these third-party risks where DOJ has equity in information, right, and interest in the information, but we don't control it. It's not subject to FISMA. We put that in our system, and we're using FISMA models that we developed to our own systems and our contractor systems to try to address sort of the response to third parties. Well, that's just kind of like, let's throw this against the wall and see if it works, right? I mean, we are ignorant, and we're going to have a conversation within the wider community about, the courts are a big problem. Each sector are a big problem, but I don't think we can do a one side. I mean, there's everybody should be under cybersecurity obligations. Well, that's like drinking the ocean. You've got to have to target certain high-risk sectors and place clear legal cybersecurity obligations on those sectors. And to do that, you're going to have some help with Congress. So hopefully 3 years from now, maybe we'll see some movement on legislation.
Well, thank you for this, Peter. That's all the time we have for the panel. So a round of applause. Thank you. And that wraps up our morning here. We have some food. We have a lot of our partners that are here, and please interact with them. But lunch is served.